Tonight, as you lie down and the room finally gets quiet, I want to offer you something that almost nobody talks about honestly. Peace that doesn't depend on believing the right thing. Not another rule, not another spiritual trend, not another productivity hack disguised as meditation. Just a simple, strange doorway called Zen. A religion of no religion that invites you to doubt everything, even itself, while you drift into the deepest sleep you've had in a long time. Maybe you've noticed this. The more content you consume about spirituality, mindset, and high vibration, the more pressure you feel to fix yourself. It's as if peace became another item on a to-do list you're already too tired to finish. You listen to guided audios that promise instant transformation, yet at night, your mind still replays the same worries, the same arguments, the same "what if I never change?" Zen starts in a different place. It whispers, what if there is nothing wrong with you to begin with? And the problem is just how noisy the room has become inside your head. That sounds almost offensive, right? If there's nothing wrong with me, why do I feel so anxious, so restless, so spiritually exhausted? Zen doesn't deny your pain. It doesn't ask you to pretend you're fine. It just says, the deepest part of you has never been broken, only covered. Like a clear lake with waves on the surface, you've mistaken the storm for the water itself. Tonight, as your body unwinds, we're going to stop fighting the waves and start discovering the lake. You're not here by accident. Something in you is tired of religious arguments and tired of empty atheism too. You've seen people use God as a weapon. You've seen others use science as a shield to avoid feeling. You may have walked through churches, temples, videos, and books, and still thought, okay, but how do I find peace when I'm alone in the dark with my thoughts? This is where Buddhism, and especially Zen, becomes strangely practical. It doesn't ask you to pick a side. It asks you to test reality in your own experience, breath by breath. In the next few minutes, you won't be asked to memorize doctrines, repeat mantras you don't understand, or force your mind to be empty. Instead, you'll hear stories, images, and examples that quietly reflect your own life back to you. The way you chase approval, the way you fear loss, the way you rush through your days and then wonder why nights feel so noisy. As you listen, something very simple will happen. Your body will relax, and your understanding will deepen at the same gentle pace. There's a paradox here that I want you to feel, not just understand. The more you stop trying to be spiritual, the more spiritual your ordinary life becomes. The more you stop trying to control your thoughts, the more your mind begins to settle on its own. The more you stop begging the universe for a different reality, the more power you discover to meet this reality with dignity and clarity. Tonight's journey is about that paradox. Doing less to finally experience more. You'll hear about a prince who walked away from a perfect life because he saw that no one escapes suffering. You'll hear about hungry ghosts that look suspiciously like our modern consumer lives, about monks who answer deep questions with jokes about the weather, and about people facing death with a calm that doesn't come from theories, but from direct insight. These aren't distant legends. They're mirrors for your anxieties, your habits, and the secret strength you don't always remember you have. And here's the fast reward I can promise, without lying to you. Even if you forget every concept after this video ends, your nervous system will remember that at least once, you allowed yourself to rest in a different way. Not numbing out with scrolling, not escaping into fantasy, but resting by becoming more present and less afraid of what's inside you. That felt sense of, I can stay with myself without running away, is worth more than any clever quote. So as you settle your head on the pillow, you don't have to do anything right. You don't have to breathe perfectly. You don't even have to stay awake to listen. Just let the words wash over you like warm water. Let the stories of Zen, this religion of no religion, slowly loosen the grip of your worries and your labels. Bit by bit, you'll see that under all the noise, there is a quiet awareness that has been watching your whole life unfold without judging you, without hurrying you, without demanding that you become someone else. Tonight, we're going to sit beside that awareness together. We'll walk through suffering, desire, ego, work, relationships, and even death. Not as enemies to be fought, but as teachers you were never introduced to properly. And as we do, you may notice something quietly radical. The peace you were chasing out there has been waiting in here the whole time, patient as a friend who never left. All you have to do, for now, is lie back, listen, and let yourself be surprised by how restful true honesty can be. He likes to begin with a scene so simple that most people almost feel exposed when they hear it. The room is dark. The phone screen has finally gone black, and yet the mind is shining brighter than ever. The pillow is soft, but the thoughts are hard. He remembers lying exactly like that, staring at nothing, while inside his chest everything felt like too much. No noise in the house, no chaos outside, and somehow, the loudest place in the universe was the space between his ears. From the outside, it looked peaceful. If someone had opened the door and glanced in, they would have seen a person lying still, breathing, apparently resting. But inside, he was stuck in a traffic jam of thoughts. Regrets parked on one side, fears honking on the other, future plans cutting the lane without warning. That's the part nobody sees. You can look completely calm and yet feel like your mind is sprinting a marathon without your permission. On that particular night, he kept checking the clock like it was judging him. 1:32, 2:09, 2:51. Each new time felt like a little slap. You're still awake. Tomorrow will be ruined. Why can't you just sleep like a normal person? The more he panicked about needing sleep, the further sleep ran away from him. It was like trying to grab water with tense hands. The tighter he squeezed, the more it slipped through. He tried the usual tricks everyone tries, changing sides 100 times, burying his head under the blanket, forcing his eyes shut as if sleep could be intimidated into showing up. He promised himself, tomorrow I'll be different. I'll be organized. I'll be calm. I'll fix everything. But that only made his internal pressure worse. Now he wasn't just tired. He was tired and disappointed in himself in advance. At some point, he did what many of us do and reached for the glowing rectangle again. Just for a minute, he thought, knowing it was a lie. He scrolled through strangers' lives, success stories, perfectly curated happiness. Every image was like a small reminder. Look how far behind you are. Instead of calming him, the feed poured gasoline on his anxious fire. He realized that his bed had turned into the office of his worst critic. In that restless state, he typed something into the search bar that he barely remembers now. Something between calm my mind and I can't stand this anymore. Among guided meditations and motivational speeches, a random title jumped out. Something about Buddhism, something about the religion of no religion. It sounded weird, almost wrong, but his curiosity was stronger than his skepticism at that hour. So he clicked, half desperate, half bored. The voice that came through the speaker wasn't dramatic or mystical. It was slow, clear, almost annoyingly calm. Instead of promising miracles, the person started talking about the mind like an overexcited dog that had never been trained to sit. That image made him smile in the dark. For the first time, someone was describing his suffering without calling him weak, crazy, or broken. They were simply saying, "This is what minds do when they've never learned how to rest." Then came a sentence that hit him harder than any fancy quote. "You are not your thoughts." He had heard variations of that before, but this time his whole body was listening. All his life, his thoughts had arrived with an ID card that said, "Hi, I'm you." If his mind said, "You're a failure," then he was a failure. If it whispered, "Everything will go wrong tomorrow," he believed the prophecy. The idea that he could watch his mind instead of obeying it felt almost illegal. As he lay there, something subtle shifted. His thoughts didn't magically stop, but a small part of his attention stepped back, like someone quietly moving from the stage to the audience. He found himself thinking, "Wow, my mind is really loud tonight," instead of, "I am a disaster tonight." That tiny change in language created a tiny pocket of space inside his chest. It wasn't enlightenment, but it was relief, like opening a window in a stuffy room. He likes to tell you this because he wants you to feel less alone in your own midnight battles. You're not the only one who lies there replaying conversations, inventing future arguments, and negotiating with an alarm clock that doesn't negotiate. He's been there, and he knows how humiliating it feels to be defeated by your own brain in a quiet room. That's why he speaks to you as if you were his only student right now, because at 3 a.m. you are. The video he found didn't ask him to believe in anything new. Nobody said, "Repeat after me," or "Join our group." Instead, the teacher kept inviting him to look directly at his experience. Notice the breath. Notice where tension lives in your body. Notice that thoughts come and go, but something in you is simply watching. It felt less like religion and more like someone finally handing him the user manual to a mind that had been glitching for years. At one point, the speaker mentioned the Buddha, not as a distant statue, but as a person who started with the same basic problem: suffering. No golden aura, no instant powers. Just a human being who couldn't stand watching pain without finding out why it was there and whether it could be reduced. That detail mattered to him. He didn't need a superhero. He needed someone who understood what it was like to be trapped in your own head. He remembers the teacher saying that Buddhism doesn't ask you to shut down your doubts. It invites them to sit at the table. That was new. He had always been taught to treat doubt like a villain, something to fight or hide. Now someone was saying, "Bring your doubt, let it speak. Just don't let it drive the car." That approach felt strangely respectful, like his inner chaos wasn't being judged, just explored. For the next few nights, he tried a small experiment. Instead of fighting every thought, he started naming them silently as they passed. Worry about money. Replay of old argument. Fear of failing. It was almost like labeling folders on a messy desktop. The files were still there, but they stopped pile driving him. Naming them turned them from monsters into visitors, and visitors don't get to own the house. He knows you might be thinking, "That sounds too simple to work." He thought the same, but simplicity is sometimes exactly what a tired brain needs. Complex solutions demand energy, and at night, your energy is gone. What Buddhism offered him in that moment wasn't an intellectual system, but a few practical tools that could be used half asleep, in the dark, with no props except his own awareness and breath. He also noticed something unexpected. Just by watching his mind without fighting it, his body began to soften a little, His jaw unclenched, his shoulders sank into the mattress, his breath became less like a sprint and more like a slow walk. He wasn't Zen by any means, but he was less trapped. It was as if his nervous system heard a new message for the first time. We don't have to fix the whole universe tonight. Looking back, he realized that this night of insomnia, which once felt like punishment, was actually a doorway. Without that pain, he'd never have searched, never have clicked, never have listened long enough to hear those strange but liberating ideas. He tells you this because maybe your own restless nights are not just problems to be exterminated, but signals pointing to a deeper path. And that path, which he would later discover through Zen and the so-called religion of no religion, begins the moment you dare to look at your own mind instead of just running from it. He likes to begin with a scene so simple that most people almost feel exposed when they hear it. The room is dark. The phone screen has finally gone black, and yet the mind is shining brighter than ever. The pillow is soft, but the thoughts are hard. He remembers lying exactly like that, staring at nothing, while inside his chest everything felt like too much. No noise in the house, no chaos outside, and somehow, the loudest place in the universe was the space between his ears. From the outside, it looked peaceful. If someone had opened the door and glanced in, they would have seen a person lying still, breathing, apparently resting. But inside, he was stuck in a traffic jam of thoughts. Regrets parked on one side, fears honking on the other, future plans cutting the lane without warning. That's the part nobody sees. You can look completely calm, and yet feel like your mind is sprinting a marathon without your permission. On that particular night, he kept checking the clock like it was judging him. 1:32, 2009, 2:51. Each new time felt like a little slap. You're still awake. Tomorrow will be ruined. Why can't you just sleep like a normal person? The more he panicked about needing sleep, the further sleep ran away from him. It was like trying to grab water with tense hands. The tighter he squeezed, the more it slipped through. He tried the usual tricks everyone tries, changing sides 100 times, burying his head under the blanket, forcing his eyes shut as if sleep could be intimidated into showing up. He promised himself, tomorrow I'll be different. I'll be organized. I'll be calm. I'll fix everything. But that only made his internal pressure worse. Now he wasn't just tired. He was tired and disappointed in himself in advance. At some point, he did what many of us do and reached for the glowing rectangle again. Just for a minute, he thought, knowing it was a lie. He scrolled through strangers' lives, success stories, perfectly curated happiness. Every image was like a small reminder. Look how far behind you are. Instead of calming him, the feed poured gasoline on his anxious fire. He realized that his bed had turned into the office of his worst critic. In that restless state, he typed something into the search bar that he barely remembers now. Something between calm my mind and I can't stand this anymore. Among guided meditations and motivational speeches, a random title jumped out. Something about Buddhism. Something about the religion of no religion. It sounded weird, almost wrong, but his curiosity was stronger than his skepticism at that hour. So he clicked, half desperate, half bored. The voice that came through the speaker wasn't dramatic or mystical. It was slow, clear, almost annoyingly calm. Instead of promising miracles, the person started talking about the mind like an overexcited dog that had never been trained to sit. That image made him smile in the dark. For the first time, someone was describing his suffering without calling him weak, crazy, or broken. They were simply saying, This is what minds do when they've never learned how to rest. Then came a sentence that hit him harder than any fancy quote. You are not your thoughts. He had heard variations of that before, but this time his whole body was listening. All his life, his thoughts had arrived with an ID card that said, "Hi, I'm you." If his mind said, "You're a failure," then he was a failure. If it whispered, "Everything will go wrong tomorrow," he believed the prophecy. The idea that he could watch his mind instead of obeying it felt almost illegal. As he lay there, something subtle shifted. His thoughts didn't magically stop, but a small part of his attention stepped back, like someone quietly moving from the stage to the audience. He found himself thinking, "Wow, my mind is really loud tonight," instead of, "I am a disaster tonight." That tiny change in language created a tiny pocket of space inside his chest. It wasn't enlightenment, but it was relief, like opening a window in a stuffy room. He likes to tell you this because he wants you to feel less alone in your own midnight battles. You're not the only one who lies there replaying conversations, inventing future arguments, and negotiating with an alarm clock that doesn't negotiate. He's been there, and he knows how humiliating it feels to be defeated by your own brain in a quiet room. That's why he speaks to you as if you were his only student right now, because at 3 a.m. you are. The video he found didn't ask him to believe in anything new. Nobody said, "Repeat after me," or "Join our group." Instead, the teacher kept inviting him to look directly at his experience. Notice the breath. Notice where tension lives in your body. Notice that thoughts come and go, but something in you is simply watching. It felt less like religion and more like someone finally handing him the user manual to a mind that had been glitching for years. At one point, the speaker mentioned the Buddha, not as a distant statue, but as a person who started with the same basic problem: suffering. No golden aura, no instant powers. Just a human being who couldn't stand watching pain without finding out why it was there and whether it could be reduced. That detail mattered to him. He didn't need a superhero. He needed someone who understood what it was like to be trapped in your own head. He remembers the teacher saying that Buddhism doesn't ask you to shut down your doubts. It invites them to sit at the table. That was new. He had always been taught to treat doubt like a villain, something to fight or hide. Now someone was saying, "Bring your doubt, let it speak. Just don't let it drive the car." That approach felt strangely respectful, like his inner chaos wasn't being judged, just explored. For the next few nights, he tried a small experiment. Instead of fighting every thought, he started naming them silently as they passed. Worry about money. Replay of old argument. Fear of failing. It was almost like labeling folders on a messy desktop. The files were still there, but they stopped pile driving him. Naming them turned them from monsters into visitors, and visitors don't get to own the house. He knows you might be thinking, "That sounds too simple to work." He thought the same, but simplicity is sometimes exactly what a tired brain needs. Complex solutions demand energy, and at night, your energy is gone. What Buddhism offered him in that moment wasn't an intellectual system, but a few practical tools that could be used half asleep, in the dark, with no props except his own awareness and breath. He also noticed something unexpected. Just by watching his mind without fighting it, his body began to soften a little. His jaw unclenched, his shoulders sank into the mattress, his breath became less like a sprint and more like a slow walk. He wasn't Zen by any means, but he was less trapped. It was as if his nervous system heard a new message for the first time. We don't have to fix the whole universe tonight. Looking back, he realized that this night of insomnia, which once felt like punishment, was actually a doorway. Without that pain, he'd never have searched, never have clicked, never have listened long enough to hear those strange but liberating ideas. He tells you this because maybe your own restless nights are not just problems to be exterminated, but signals pointing to a deeper path. And that path, which he would later discover through Zen and the so-called religion of no religion, begins the moment you dare to look at your own mind instead of just running from it. He still remembers the first time he heard that old Buddhist image, a child licking honey off the edge of a sharp knife. At first, he thought, okay, that's a bit dramatic. But the more he watched his own life honestly, the more that image stopped being poetry and started being biography. Desire always arrived with a sweet promise. Just get this one thing, and then you'll finally rest. The sweetness was real. The cuts were real too. He knows you felt that in your own way. Maybe for you it was, when I earn this salary, I'll finally be at peace. Or, when I lose this weight, find this person, move to that place, hit that number, then I'll stop worrying. And sure, when you got closer to it, there was a rush, a temporary high. But 1 week later, the mind had quietly updated the target. Suddenly, peace had moved a few meters ahead again. He likes to compare it to those apps that constantly update their terms and conditions without asking your permission. You think you've finally accepted the deal with life. If I achieve X, I can relax. But then the mind pops up. Actually, now it has to be Y. It's like climbing an escalator that's going down. No matter how fast you run, you never quite feel like you've arrived where you're supposed to be. Modern life just gave the honey new packaging. Instead of a jar on a shelf, it's the glow of a notification, the sound of a message, the spike of attention when someone comments, likes, or checks on you. Each little buzz feels like a drop of sweetness. You're seen, you exist, you matter. But when the phone goes silent, something strange happens. The quiet doesn't feel peaceful, it feels empty. That's where the blade hides. He went through a season where numbers ruled his mood. Views, followers, income, productivity hours, all silently deciding if today he was worth something or not. He told himself, when I hit that milestone, I'll finally feel safe. The day he reached it, he was happy. For about an afternoon. By the next morning, his mind had already moved the finish line. That's when he realized the problem wasn't the goal, it was the hunger behind it. To make it simple, he asks you to imagine a phone battery that never shows 100%, no matter how long you charge it. It gets to 73%, sometimes 81%, but it always drops back down. That's what living inside unconscious desire feels like. You tell yourself, just a bit more, just one more step. But the sense of almost enough, but not quite, never really leaves. It's exhausting, especially when you're lying awake in the dark. He's not anti-dreams or anti-ambition. He doesn't want you to throw away your projects, your plans, your drive. The point isn't to kill desire. The point is to see what kind of desire is driving you. There's a huge difference between I'd love to create this because it feels alive, and if I don't get this, I am nothing. One desire opens your chest. The other squeezes it like a fist. He suggests a very practical exercise you can play with tomorrow. Choose one thing you really want right now. More money, recognition, a relationship, a result. Then ask, what do I believe this will give me emotionally? Maybe it's safety, freedom, respect, feeling finally enough. When you name the feeling behind the object, You're already stepping away from the knife and looking at the honey with clearer eyes. He shares one of his own desires because he knows it might look like yours in different clothes. For a long time, he desperately wanted a certain car. Not just liked it, needed it. When he sat down and asked, "What do I think this car will give me?" the answer was simple: respect. Proof that he had made it. The feeling of not being small. He realized he wasn't chasing leather seats. He was chasing a story about himself. That's why he says desire is rarely about the thing. It's about the feeling you hope the thing will deliver to your heart. The problem is that objects can't permanently give you what only a deeper shift inside can offer. So you get the thing, your nervous system celebrates for a bit, and then the emptiness calmly returns to its seat. Just like a movie that ends and credits roll, the mind quietly says, "Next." He likes another picture for this: drinking salty water in the ocean. You are absolutely thirsty. The water absolutely wets your mouth. But the more you drink, the thirstier you become. More achievements, more attention, more purchases, more distractions. None of them are evil by themselves. But if you're using them to fix a feeling of, "I am not enough," they often behave like salt. There is contact, but no true quenching. At night, this mechanism is brutal. You lie down hoping for rest, and desire starts a PowerPoint presentation in your head. Slide 1. What you haven't achieved yet. Slide 2. What others already have. Slide 3. Everything you should be by now. Your body is horizontal, but your nervous system is running uphill. Sleep doesn't come because your mind is convinced resting is dangerous until everything is finally under control. Buddhism doesn't break into the room yelling, "Stop desiring." That would just become another desire, the desire not to desire. Instead, it invites you to look at desire with the same kind of gentle curiosity you'd use with a child. You watch how it appears, what it promises, how it feels in your chest or stomach, and what happens when you don't immediately obey. That shift from "I am desire" to desire is here is already a spiritual step. He recommends a small trick that helped him a lot when he was stuck in the middle of the night. When a thought arose like, "I need to fix my life," he added silently, "Right now, in this exact moment, lying in bed. I need more money. Right now, in this exact moment, lying in bed." It sounds almost ridiculous when you phrase it like that. You start to see how much artificial urgency your mind creates out of habit. Over time, he began to notice that not all desires felt the same in his body. Some burned with anxiety, comparison, and shame. They tightened his jaw and sped up his heart. Others felt strangely clean. The desire to learn, to serve, to love better, to live with more truth. Those didn't slice him up. They felt like a quiet fire in a fireplace, not a wildfire in a dry forest. That distinction changed everything. He wants you to understand something subtle but crucial. The goal isn't to become cold or indifferent. The goal is to stop hurting yourself in the name of success. When you look honestly at your desires, without guilt, you start asking wiser questions. Will this truly nourish me or just distract me for a little while? That kind of honesty is already a form of meditation, even if you're just sitting in your car or lying with your eyes open in the dark. And yet, he knows that desire doesn't live only in thoughts and ideas. It lives in the flesh, in tight shoulders, shallow breaths, clenched jaws, restless legs. If you really want to transform your relationship with desire and finally sleep in your own skin, you can't stay only in philosophy. You have to learn how to meet the body where anxiety shows up, especially at night. That's where the next part of this journey starts to get very real. He likes to say that anxiety is not a thought problem first. It's a body problem that thoughts learned how to decorate. Before the story, "Something is wrong with me" appears, there is a tight chest, a faster heartbeat, a knot in the stomach. He remembers realizing this one night when he tried to think positively, and nothing changed. His thoughts were giving motivational speeches, but his nervous system was still shaking under the table like a scared dog during a storm. From the outside, anxiety is invisible. You can be lying perfectly still, eyes closed, looking peaceful, while inside your body, alarms are ringing. The heart speeds up, the breath gets shallow, the muscles tense as if something is about to explode, even though the room is quiet. That's one of the cruelest parts. Nobody sees how hard your body is working just to stay in bed and not run away from a danger that isn't even in the room. For a long time, his instinct was to fight those sensations. Tight chest, breathe harder, fast heart, panic about having a heart attack, restless legs, get angry at his own body. The logic was simple. If I hate this enough, it will go away. But the body doesn't work like a machine you can shout at. The more he resisted the sensations, the louder they got. It was like trying to calm a crying child by yelling, "Stop crying!" in its face. Buddhism offered him a completely different, almost shocking suggestion. What if you stopped trying to get rid of the feelings and started getting curious about them? Instead of, "This is wrong, this is bad, this has to stop," the attitude becomes, "What exactly is happening here? Where in the body is the anxiety strongest? Is it hot or cold? Moving or still? Tight or buzzing?" This sounds small, but it changes everything. He likes to give a very simple exercise anyone can do, even half asleep. When anxiety shows up at night, instead of jumping immediately into thoughts about tomorrow, bring your attention to 3 spots: your chest, your throat, your stomach. Just notice which one feels the most intense. Don't try to fix it. Just observe. Sometimes you'll realize it's not your whole life that's falling apart. It's one specific knot in one specific part of the body. At first, this observation can feel fake, like pretending to be calm while actually freaking out inside. He understands that. When he started, his inner voice was screaming, "This isn't working. This is stupid. I'm still scared." The trick is, you don't have to shut that voice up. You just add another layer to it. Here is fear. Here is a tight chest. Here is a fast heart. You're not denying the storm. You're noticing the storm and the sky around it. He uses a simple image. Imagine you're watching waves crashing on the shore. If you put your face right into the wave, that's all you see, and you get knocked over. But if you take a few steps back, you see the wave and the ocean behind it. Anxiety is the wave. Awareness is the ocean. When he first heard that, he thought it was just pretty language. But lying in bed one night, he realized there's fear here, but there's also something watching the fear. In Zen, they don't ask you to believe in that something as a dogma. They ask you to feel it directly. So he started practicing tiny body check-ins during the day, not just at night, in traffic, in a queue, scrolling on his phone. Where is my body right now? How's my breathing? Is my jaw clenched? The more he practiced during calm moments, the easier it became to remember in the middle of the night storm. One of the most liberating insights for him was this: anxiety is often the body saying, "You've been running too fast for too long." Not just physically, but mentally. Jumping between apps, worries, tasks, comparisons. Your nervous system hasn't had a chance to complete a single cycle of rest. So when you finally lie down, it doesn't trust that it's safe yet. It keeps scanning for danger, because that's the job nobody taught it to stop doing. Instead of blaming himself, he started treating his body more like a tired employee who had been on a double shift for years. When the anxiety came, he imagined placing a hand on his chest, even if he didn't physically move. The message was simple. I see you. You've been working hard. Thank you. We're safe for now. It felt cheesy at first, but the body understands tone more than words. That gentle attitude began to lower the volume. He's honest about this. It didn't turn him into a Buddha floating in silence. There were still nights of racing thoughts and tight muscles. But the difference was that he no longer believed anxiety meant, I am broken. Instead, he saw it as, my system is tired and overprotective right now. That small shift removed layers of shame. You can't heal something you're busy hating. Buddhism helped him hate himself less in the moments he needed compassion the most. He also discovered that some triggers were very predictable. Too much caffeine, too much news, constant social media, no real breaks. It was like feeding his nervous system energy drinks and then begging it to sleep like a baby. So he began experimenting like a scientist. Less caffeine after a certain hour, slower nights without a glowing screen right in his face, short walks instead of more scrolling. Not as self-punishment, but as an experiment in kindness. Sometimes people ask him, but what do I do when the anxiety is really strong? He answers with 3 steps. First, feel the feet. Notice where they touch the mattress, the ground, the fabric. Second, feel the breath, not to control it, but to ride it like a surfer rides a wave. Third, name gently, fear is here, tightness is here, heat is here. You won't always feel better instantly, but you will feel less alone inside your own skin. He realized that anxiety gets worse when it feels like it has to fight alone in the dark. When awareness joins the feeling, it's like turning on a small lamp in a scary room. The monster in the corner is still there, but now you can see that it's just a pile of clothes and a shadow. The heart might still race, but your relationship to the racing changes. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what is my body trying to tell me tonight? Over time, he noticed something quiet. The nights when he met his anxiety with curiosity and kindness, even if he slept less, he woke up feeling slightly more resilient, not completely destroyed. The nights when he fought himself, judged himself, and tried to force sleep like a task, he woke up feeling like he'd been in a war, the same number of hours in bed, but completely different quality of rest. And once he understood anxiety as a messenger in the body, not just a curse in the brain, another question started to arise almost by itself. If the body can react this intensely to fear, what else is it capable of? What happens when the mind stops living only in threats and starts to see the different worlds or inner landscapes it visits every day? Hells, heavens, and everything in between. That curiosity began to open the door to a much deeper map of the human experience that the old Buddhist masters called the 6 realms. He likes to say that Buddhism gave him a language for something he had always felt, but never knew how to describe. The feeling that his inner world changes like countries on a map. Same body, same bed, same pillow, but completely different worlds inside. The old teachers called these worlds the 6 realms, not places in the sky or underground, but psychological landscapes the mind visits every single day, often without telling you it has packed its bags. The hell realm is easy to recognize. It's those moments when everything feels on fire inside, even if nothing dramatic is happening outside. Shame, rage, despair, panic, like being locked in a mental room with alarms blaring. He remembers lying in the dark, thinking, "My life is over," after one embarrassing mistake at work. Objectively, nothing catastrophic had happened, but his nervous system had stamped his inner passport. Welcome to hell. Then there's the hungry ghost realm, which might be the unofficial headquarters of the modern world. In the old images, these beings have huge empty stomachs and tiny mouths, always wanting, never satisfied. Today, they just carry smartphones. You know this realm when you keep refreshing apps, buying things you don't need, seeking messages from someone who doesn't answer, and no amount of more fills that subtle emptiness behind your ribs. The animal realm isn't about actual animals. It's about living on pure instinct and habit, without awareness. He notices this realm when he eats without tasting, watches video after video without remembering the last one, or automatically says yes to everything out of fear, not choice. It's not evil, it's just unconscious. Like driving on a highway and suddenly realizing you don't remember the last 10 minutes. The body was there, but you were not. The angry god realm, or Asura realm, is where comparison and competition run the show. Here the mind constantly asks, who is ahead? Who is behind? Who threatened my status? It shows up in arguments that escalate over nothing, in jealous scrolling, in imaginary fights you have in the shower. He has caught himself rehearsing comebacks to conversations that never happened. At that moment, inside, he was already living in a war zone of his own making. The God realm sounds beautiful at first. It's the state of pleasure, success, and comfort. Things are going well. People admire you. The numbers look good. The sun seems to shine just for you. There's nothing wrong with this, but the danger is believing it will last forever. He calls this the vacation that never ends, illusion. When life inevitably shifts, people fall hard because they secretly thought they had bought permanent happiness. And then there is the human realm, which Buddhism surprisingly treats as the best place to wake up. Not because it's perfect, but because it's balanced. Here we have enough comfort to reflect and enough suffering to stay humble. He recognizes the human realm in quiet mornings with coffee, in honest conversations, in those nights when you're not ecstatic, not destroyed, just present, aware that life is fragile and precious at the same time. What shocked him when he learned this map is how often we visit several realms in a single day. You might wake up in the God realm after good news, drop into the Asura realm in traffic, slide into the animal realm at lunch on autopilot, fall into the hungry ghost realm after work scrolling, and end the night in the hell realm replaying fears. No airplanes, no passports, just one nervous system traveling non-stop. At night, this map becomes especially vivid. Lying in bed, you can feel like you're in the hell realm when shame burns, in the hungry ghost realm when you ache for a message or validation, in the animal realm when you're numb and disconnected, or in the human realm when you can actually feel everything without drowning. The body stays on the mattress. The mind, however, is a restless traveler hopping between worlds. He remembers one specific night when he finally saw this clearly. In a single hour, he went from panic, hell, to craving someone's attention, hungry ghost, to mindless scrolling, animal, to imagining arguments, asura, to briefly remembering his breath, human. Same room, same silence. same blanket. The only thing that changed was the realm his mind believed in at that moment. Realizing this made his suffering feel less like fate and more like weather. So he began turning this ancient map into a simple, practical habit. When things got intense, he'd quietly ask himself, which realm am I in right now? Not to blame himself, but to name the landscape. If he felt endless lack, he'd say, hungry ghost. If everything felt hostile, okay, hell realm. The moment he named it, a tiny part of him stepped outside the story. It was no longer, this is reality forever, but this is the realm I'm passing through. He likes to compare it to being in a theme park without a map. If you don't know where you are, every ride feels permanent. You might think, this horror ride is my whole life now. But once someone hands you a map and says, relax, this is just one zone. There are exits. There are other areas. Your body still reacts on the roller coaster, but you're not as terrified. Awareness doesn't delete the ride. It changes how you experience it. One important detail he emphasizes, none of these realms make you bad. They just show where your mind is practicing at the moment. Feeling like a hungry ghost doesn't mean you're greedy. It means a part of you is starving for something deeper than the thing you're chasing. Being in hell doesn't mean you're doomed. It means pain is loud and needs care, not judgment. When you stop moralizing your inner weather, it's easier to walk through the storm. He also noticed that moments of genuine presence often felt like stepping into the human realm, even if nothing external changed. Same problem, same uncertainty, but now there was a bit of space around it. It's like standing at a window and watching rain instead of being lost in the middle of a flood. The water is still there, but your position relative to it is very different. As this awareness grew, another question began quietly knocking on his inner door. If the mind keeps visiting all these different realms, who is it that's doing the traveling? If he can watch himself move from hell to hungry ghost to human within the same hour, maybe he is not any of those realms. Maybe he is not even the character inside them, but something larger, something deeper, that witnesses the whole journey. That question, which started like a whisper in the back of his mind, slowly became impossible to ignore. If he is not the anxious realm, not the craving realm, not even the peaceful realm, then who or what is he really? And it's exactly at this point, when a person dares to look past the stories and moods, that Buddhism brings in one of its most radical and freeing ideas. The possibility that the solid self we cling to is not as solid as we were taught to believe. He remembers the exact night the question finally hit him with full force. If my mood changes every hour, if my roles change all the time, who exactly is this me I keep trying to fix? Lying there in the dark, he could feel yesterday's version of himself already fading. The brave one, the insecure one, the calm one, the jealous one. They all felt real when they appeared, but none of them stayed. It was like watching different actors borrow the same costume. During the day, it was easier to forget this. He had labels to lean on, job title, relationship status, age, nationality, even the little bio on social media. Those gave a sense of solidity, like stickers on a suitcase. This belongs to me. But at night, in the quiet, those labels didn't help much. The fear, the longing, the memories, they didn't ask for his resume. They just showed up and sat on his chest. Buddhism came in with a question so simple, it almost sounded offensive. Are you sure you are this story you tell about yourself? Not, do you exist? But, are you really this fixed, separate thing you imagine? At first, he resisted. He thought, of course I'm me. Who else would I be? But then he noticed something strange. His sense of me changed depending on who was in the room, what day it was, and how much sleep he had gotten. He likes to use a very down-to-earth example. Think about how you act with your family, your friends, your boss, and when you're alone. Same body, same name, but completely different versions appear. With one person, you're the caretaker. With another, you're the clown. With another, you're the quiet listener. Which one is the real you? If you say all of them, then you're already closer to what the Buddha was pointing at. The Buddha's insight wasn't that you're a nobody. It was that you're not a thing, not a fixed object like a rock you can put on a shelf. You're more like a river, always there, always flowing, never exactly the same twice. On Monday, you might feel strong and clear. On Tuesday, muddy and confused. The river is real, but try to grab one permanent piece of it, and it slips through your fingers. He remembers doing a little experiment that shook him more than any fancy philosophy. He sat down and tried to find the self inside his own experience. Was it in his thoughts? But his thoughts changed every second. Was it in his emotions? Those shifted like weather. Was it in his body? Cells dying and renewing all the time. Where exactly was this solid me he had been defending so fiercely? He didn't find a little glowing ball called self anywhere. What he found instead was a constant dance. Sensations, thoughts, memories, images, beliefs, roles. Like an app with many windows open at once. None of them alone could be called me, but together they created a convincing illusion. It's the same way a movie looks like one fluid story, even though it's really just a rapid sequence of single frames. At first, this idea scared him. If there's no solid self, then what am I? Nothing. That's a very common misunderstanding. Buddhism isn't saying you don't exist. It's saying you don't exist as an isolated, unchanging block separated from everything else. You're more like a note in a song. The note is real, but it only makes sense in relation to the other notes around it. He likes to compare it to a wave in the ocean. If a wave could talk, it might say, I'm this tall, this strong, this important. It might compare itself to other waves, feel proud or ashamed. But all along, it was never separate from the ocean. When the wave disappears, the water doesn't vanish. It simply changes form. Buddhism is gently whispering, you're water that forgot it was water, and thinks it's only the shape of this particular wave. This might sound very abstract, but it has a surprisingly practical effect, especially at night. When he lay in bed thinking, I am anxious, I am a failure, I am ruined, everything felt heavy and permanent. When he began to see those as temporary experiences passing through awareness. Anxiety is here, shame is here, memory is here. They still hurt, but they no longer defined him completely. He became the sky, not the storm. He invites you to try something simple right now. Instead of saying, I am anxious, experiment with anxiety is present. Instead of, I am broken, try pain is here. This sounds like a small language trick, but it's not. It shifts you from being the problem to being the space that notices the problem. The bed, the room, the darkness stay the same, but the inner position you watch from changes. He also realized that the belief in a solid, separate self was secretly exhausting. It meant he had to constantly defend this me, protect its image, prove its value, hide its flaws. Every mistake felt like an attack on his existence. Every criticism seemed like a knife aimed at his core. No wonder his shoulders were tense and his sleep was fragile. He wasn't just living, he was guarding a castle 24/7. When he started to loosen his grip on this castle, something unexpected happened. He didn't become irresponsible or passive. He actually became kinder. If he wasn't a fixed, perfect statue, he could allow himself to learn, apologize, change direction. He could admit, "Today I'm confused," without collapsing. He could see others the same way, not as fixed villains or saints, but as rivers flowing through their own storms. Buddhism calls this insight no self, but he prefers to explain it as more than just this self. You're not only the character with your name, your past, your worries, you're also the awareness that watches this character move through the 6 realms: hell, hungry ghost, animal, angry God, human, and God. That awareness doesn't shrink when the mood shifts. It's there when you're panicking, and it's there when you're peaceful. At night, when thoughts get loud, remembering this can be a quiet revolution. Instead of wrestling with every story, what if I fail? What if they leave? What if I'm not enough? You can gently shift focus. Who is hearing these thoughts? Who is feeling this tightness? Who is watching this movie? You don't need a perfect answer. The question itself starts to pull you out of the whirlpool and back into the wider ocean. Over time, he noticed that this perspective didn't erase his personality. He still had preferences, habits, quirks. He still loved certain music, got annoyed in traffic, enjoyed certain foods. The difference was that he no longer believed those things were the total truth of who he is. They became clothes he could wear and change, not skin he was trapped inside. That made the nights feel less like prison and more like a temporary room. And once he had tasted, even slightly, the freedom of not being a rigid, isolated someone, another layer of Buddhist teaching began to make much more sense. If he wasn't separate, then his life was woven into everything around him. The air, the people, the planet, even the smallest everyday event turned into a mirror of this deep interconnection. That realization would lead him straight into the next insight. That reality itself can be seen through different worlds or levels, all happening at the same time. He likes to joke that before he found Buddhism, he thought reality only had one resolution setting. What you see is what you get. Table is table. Problem is problem. Me is me. End of story. Then he stumbled on an old Buddhist teaching that said, in a very polite way, "You're not wrong. You're just seeing only the first layer." It was like discovering that his TV had been on standard definition his whole life, and someone quietly switched it to 4K. The old Zen teachers talked about 4 worlds, or 4 ways of seeing reality. Don't worry about the strange names. Think of them as 4 different camera modes on the same phone. You don't change the world by changing the mode. You just change how much of the truth you're actually noticing. The first mode is the world of particulars, the everyday world: pillows, phones, bills, people, traffic lights, that one noisy neighbor. In this first world, everything looks separate. Your pillow is here, your worries are there, your boss is over there, your heart is in here. It's the level where we say, "That's my car, that's your job, that's their problem. And there's nothing wrong with this." If you forget this level, you'll walk into walls and miss your rent payments. Buddhism never asks you to pretend particular things don't exist. But if you stay only here, life becomes a constant game of me versus everything else. My success, your success. My loss, your gain. The mind gets trapped in what he calls box thinking. Everything is a separate box with a name on it. At night, those boxes crawl into bed with you. Money box, relationship box, past box, future box. No wonder it's hard to sleep with so many open tabs. The second world the Buddha pointed to is the world of unity. This is when you suddenly sense that everything is connected underneath the surface. It can happen in simple moments. Watching the sunset, listening to music, holding a child, even washing dishes. For a second, the edges between me and not me feel a little softer. You don't disappear. You just feel less like a lonely island and more like part of the ocean. He remembers experiencing this while walking alone at night. No mystical lights, no angels, no special soundtrack, just the sound of his own footsteps and the wind. For a brief moment, he felt, I'm not standing in the world. I am part of this whole movement. The street, the sky, his breath, the silent buildings. Somehow it all felt like one big, quiet thing breathing together. Then his phone buzzed and the spell broke, but the taste stayed. That second world is like zooming out on a map. When you're too zoomed in, you only see one street and worry it's the whole planet. Zoom out, and you realize that street is part of a city, in a country, on a planet, in a universe. Your problem doesn't vanish, but it stops feeling like the only thing that exists. This unity view doesn't make your bills disappear, but it does keep them from becoming your entire universe. The third world is his favorite, because it's where spirituality gets practical. Freud. It's the world where the particular and the universal work together, like a song where both the melody and the rhythm matter. Here, you can drink a cup of tea and feel both. This is just tea, and this moment is mysteriously precious. It's not either or, it's both. And Zen people love to live here. In this world, washing dishes is still washing dishes. There's soap, water, plates, maybe a bit of boredom, but there's also a quiet awareness that this very simple act is connected to everything. The people you'll feed tomorrow, the farmer who grew the food, the water system, the earth that gave the clay for the plate. Suddenly, ordinary actions stop feeling like wasted time and start feeling like small threads in a huge tapestry. He started experimenting with this at night. When he couldn't sleep, instead of seeing the bed as just a bed, he began to notice the fabric touching his skin, the air in the room, the distant sounds outside. He imagined the cotton fields, the people who built the mattress, the electricity that powers the fan, the entire chain of causes that allowed him to lie there. His mind became less obsessed with one narrow worry and more aware of being held by a much bigger web. Then comes the fourth world, which sounds like pure poetry until you feel even a little of it. It's the world where every single thing implies every other thing, like a room of mirrors where each reflection contains all the others. In this way of seeing, nothing is just itself. Your small action, your sentence, your mood sends ripples that touch everything, not as a metaphor, as the actual structure of reality. He likes to explain it with something simple. Sending a message at 2:2 a.m. Maybe you think it's just a text, but it changes the other person's night, their mood, their decisions the next morning, how they speak to someone else, how that someone treats their child, and so on. One message in the dark can shift an entire small piece of the world. Suddenly, your existence doesn't feel meaningless. It feels dangerously meaningful. This fourth world is why the old Zen masters said that drinking tea can be cosmic. Not because the tea is magic, but because that one sip includes the sun, the rain, the soil, the workers, Your body, your ancestors, your future. It's all there, hidden inside something so ordinary you'd usually rush through it without looking. When you start to feel this, just another day stops existing. Every day becomes a meeting of infinite causes. At first, this can actually feel heavy. If everything is connected, then everything I do matters. That's a lot of responsibility. He felt that too. But over time, it became less of a burden and more of a comfort. If everything is connected, then you're never really alone in your fight. Your healing affects others. Your peace at 3 a.m. is not just yours. It subtly radiates into your words, your choices, your presence tomorrow. He often tells people, you don't need to believe in these four worlds like a doctrine. Just notice how you already move between them. When you're stressed, you're stuck in the first world, separate, small, squeezed. When you feel deeply moved by music or nature, you're tasting the second. When you suddenly feel gratitude while doing something ordinary, you're in the third. And when you sense that every tiny thing matters, you're flirting with the fourth. This whole teaching is not about choosing one world and abandoning the others. A wise life is more like learning to use all four camera modes when needed. Sometimes you must focus on the practical. Pay bills, send emails, brush teeth. Sometimes you need to zoom out and remember you're part of something vast. Sometimes you blend them. Sometimes you sense the whole universe in a single breath before sleep. And yet, even this beautiful map can become another thing the mind clings to. Am I in the right world now? Am I spiritual enough? Am I doing it correctly? He's seen people turn even these teachings into pressure. That's why, after talking about all these levels and layers, Buddhism comes back with one of its most down-to-earth messages, the path of the middle, the art of not falling into extremes, even the extreme of overcomplicating spirituality itself. He says one of the most underrated superpowers in Buddhism is something very simple and very unglamorous: balance. Not the kind of balance people post on social media, but the quiet middle path the Buddha discovered by burning himself at both extremes. First, a life of pleasure and comfort. Then, a life of brutal self-punishment. Only when both failed did he realize truth doesn't live at the edges. It lives in the space in between. He likes to imagine the Buddha as someone who tried the two most common strategies we still use today. The first strategy is, if I can just surround myself with enough comfort, I'll be safe. Nice things, entertainment, good food, distractions. The second is, if I make my life hard enough and discipline myself brutally, I'll become pure and strong. Both seem promising. Both turned out to be traps. For him, this isn't just ancient history. It's painfully modern. He's lived both extremes. There were phases when he chased pleasure and escape. Food, screens, endless scrolling. When discomfort appeared, he ran. There were other phases when he treated himself like a soldier in a war. Zero rest, no kindness, punishing routines, harsh self-talk. Both styles had one thing in common: they never truly brought peace. The middle way isn't about being halfway lazy or halfway rigid. It's something deeper. It's the art of noticing when the mind is leaning too far in one direction and gently leaning the other way to find center again. If he notices he's been escaping too much into comfort, he brings in a bit more discipline. If he notices he's been whipping himself with guilt and pressure, he invites more gentleness. He often uses the image of a guitar string. Too loose, and it doesn't play. Too tight, and it snaps. The Buddha wasn't saying, don't play. He was saying, tune it. Your life, your practice, Even the way you try to sleep at night needs that tuning. If you force sleep, it runs away. If you don't care at all and live in total chaos, restful sleep also avoids you. The middle way is learning how to hold yourself firmly but kindly. He noticed this in his own evenings. There were nights when he tried to control everything perfectly. Strict schedules, no flexibility, attacking himself if he broke a single rule. There were other nights when he gave up entirely, staying on his phone for hours, eating anything, ignoring his body. In both cases, he woke up tired. It wasn't the rules or the lack of them that were the problem. It was the spirit behind them. Fear, not wisdom. The middle way starts with a very honest question. What am I overdoing right now? Maybe it's overthinking. Maybe it's overworking. Maybe it's overindulging. The follow-up question is just as important. What am I neglecting? Rest, movement, real connection, silence, honest conversation. This isn't about self-judgment. It's about seeing the seesaw clearly so you can stop pretending it's level when it obviously isn't. He remembers a period when he tried to solve his anxiety with extreme spirituality. Meditate for hours, strict diets, endless self-analysis. No fun, no pleasure, no softness allowed. He thought, if I take this path seriously enough, I'll become peaceful. What actually happened was that his world became smaller, stiffer, heavier. He had traded external distractions for internal obsession. Different costume, same imbalance. On the other side, he knew times when he used balance as an excuse. I deserve this. Life is short. I'll fix it later. More sweets, more scrolling, more late nights, more ignoring his inner signals. He called it living, but it was really avoiding. When his body finally demanded payment in the form of burnout, he realized that calling something self-care doesn't make it true care if it's secretly self-sabotage. In Buddhism, the middle way isn't some boring compromise. It's actually very dynamic. The Buddha would often teach one thing to someone who was too indulgent, and the opposite thing to someone who was too harsh with themselves. If a person hated their body, he encouraged kindness. If someone worshipped their comfort, he challenged them to step out of it. Same truth, different medicine, depending on the illness. He likes to apply this directly to the mind at night. If your thoughts are racing at 200 km/h, the middle way isn't to force them to zero. It's to gently slow them down. Maybe you don't go from chaos to perfect silence. Maybe you go from chaos to one simple anchor, your breathing, a phrase, a feeling of gratitude. Instead of demanding, stop thinking now, you invite, let's think less loudly for a while. He also sees the middle way in how we deal with emotions. One extreme is suppressing them. I shouldn't feel this. I need to be strong. This is stupid. The other extreme is drowning in them, replaying the story, feeding the anger, hugging the sadness until it becomes your entire identity. The middle way is, I feel this. I won't deny it. But I also won't let it drive the car. You let the emotion ride in the back seat, not grab the steering wheel. A practical example he loves. Imagine you had a very hard day. One extreme is punishing yourself for not being productive enough and forcing more work late into the night. The other is numbing yourself with endless distractions until 3 a.m. The middle way might look like this. You acknowledge the rough day. Do one small, meaningful action to close it, like writing down tomorrow's 3 priorities, and then consciously choose a simple, calming activity before bed. He wants you to notice how often your mind speaks in extremes. Always, never, everything, nothing. I'll never change. This always happens to me. If I don't fix this now, everything will collapse. Those are the mental versions of starving yourself or binging. Buddhism invites you to gently replace them with softer, truer phrases. Not always, but often. This happens a lot, and I'd like to change it. Maybe not everything depends on tonight. Over time, walking the middle path feels less like walking on a tightrope and more like learning to surf. The waves of life still come. Stress, joy, loss, surprise. But instead of trying to freeze the ocean or escape the beach, you learn to adjust in real time. Too far forward, lean back. Too far back, lean in. Balance stops being a static goal and becomes a living skill. And as he practiced this, a quiet realization began to grow in him. The middle way isn't just a technique for personal peace. It's also the logic behind some of Zen's strangest methods. Those paradoxical answers. Those weird stories that seem to say one thing and its opposite at the same time. Underneath the confusion, there's a purpose. To knock us out of our extremes and point us directly to a freedom that logic alone can't reach. He admits that the first time he heard a Zen story, he thought, these people are either enlightened or completely crazy. A student asks, what is Buddha? And the master answers, 3 pounds of flax. Someone else asks about ultimate reality, and the reply is, it's windy again this morning. At first, it feels like listening to a wise person who refuses to answer a single question directly. The more he studied, the more he realized the masters weren't avoiding the questions. They were avoiding the trap inside the questions. When someone says, what is the ultimate thing? The mind wants a perfect definition to grab and store. Zen knows that any definition, no matter how poetic, becomes just another concept to cling to. So instead of feeding the mind, the master points beyond it. He likes to compare it to a person who keeps asking, what is fire, while standing in front of a fireplace, freezing? The Zen master doesn't hand him a scientific explanation about combustion. He pushes his hands closer to the flames and says, feel. It's not that words are useless. It's that some truths can only be known by direct contact. Zen's weird answers are attempts to warm your hands, not entertain your brain. One of the most famous tools of this direct style is the koan, a question or statement that can't be solved with logic alone. What is the sound of one hand clapping? Who were you before your parents were born? If you try to answer like in school, you'll go in circles. That's exactly the point. The koan is a carefully crafted frustration designed to exhaust the mind's usual tricks. He remembers trying to outsmart a koan once. He read commentaries, watched videos, analyzed every word. The more he studied, the more frustrated he became. It was like trying to open a door by pushing on the wall next to it. Only when he got tired of being clever and just sat with the question, letting it echo in silence, did something soften. The koan didn't give him an answer. It changed the place he was listening from. He likes to say that a good koan is like a splinter in your usual way of thinking. You can't ignore it. It keeps catching on your mind throughout the day. Washing dishes, walking, even trying to fall asleep. You find yourself thinking, what is my original face? Not as a philosophy exercise, but as a real, almost intimate puzzle. It becomes less about getting it right, and more about seeing what you are beyond your usual mask. In everyday life, the mind loves to build boxes and put labels on everything. This is good. This is bad. This is me. This is not me. Zen sometimes comes with a hammer and breaks the boxes. Not to leave you lost, but to show you that you've been living in a tiny room with the windows painted shut. When a master answers a spiritual question with something completely ordinary, like, "Have you eaten your rice?" he's opening a window. He remembers a day when he was obsessing about his purpose in life. Big questions, big pressure. He asked a teacher for help, expecting a cosmic speech. The teacher simply asked, "Did you drink water today with awareness?" He almost laughed. It sounded too simple, but driving home, he realized he wanted a huge answer because he was ignoring the small, obvious ways meaning already flowed through his day. Zen's direct pointing is not only in words, it's also in silence and action. Sometimes the master simply raises a finger, closes a door, or gives a shout. To us, that can look rude or theatrical. But inside the tradition, those gestures are meant to hit the student's awareness like a bell. Wake up now, not later, not in theory, not in your next life. Now. The form can be strange, but the message is deeply compassionate. He compares this to a friend grabbing your shoulders when you're about to step into traffic. You might be shocked in the moment, even annoyed, but later you realize that the rude interruption probably saved you. Zen methods can feel like that. They interrupt the comfortable dream, not because your dream is evil, but because you're missing the fresh, living reality happening underneath it. What does all this have to do with lying awake in bed? Quite a lot. At night, your mind is full of silent koans. What if I fail? What if they don't love me? What is going to happen to me? These questions rarely have real answers at 3 a.m., yet the mind keeps chewing them, hoping to find safety. Zen gently suggests that sometimes the only wise response is to step out of the question itself. He began practicing a simple Zen move with his own worries. Instead of answering them, he would sometimes respond with an ordinary physical action. When his mind screamed, "What is going to happen in 5 years?" he would gently bring attention back to the sensation of his breath, or the weight of his body on the mattress, and quietly ask himself, "What is happening right now?" It wasn't a magic spell, but it was a doorway out of mental labyrinths. He also started treating his own anxious thoughts like tiny koans. When the mind said, "I'm not enough," he didn't try to prove the opposite with a list of achievements. He would sit with the question behind the statement. Who is the I that is not enough? Where is it exactly? Not to bully himself, but to see if that not enough had any real shape outside of thought. Many times, he found only sensations and old stories, not a solid truth. Over time, he realized that Zen pointing is always moving in one direction, away from getting lost in thoughts and toward direct experience. From about to as, from thinking about life to being this breath, this heartbeat, this sound in the dark. The stories still appear, but they lose some of their hypnotic power. It's like watching subtitles at the bottom of the screen instead of believing they are the movie. He's honest. This doesn't mean he now laughs at every worry like a fearless superhero. The mind still loves its dramas, but he has more tools now. If a thought tries to drag him into an endless debate, he can sometimes smile and treat it like a koan that isn't meant to be solved, only seen through. The question becomes a bell, not a prison. Ah, the mind is worrying again. I don't need to fix this thought. I can return to the texture of the pillow, the rhythm of the breath. As this style of direct pointing became more natural, something curious happened. The line between spiritual practice and ordinary life started to blur. Making tea, washing hands, turning off a light, all of it became potential Zen answers to the mind's endless questions. He didn't have to wait for a master in a monastery to shout, "Wake up!" Life itself started doing it. softly, through the simplest gestures. And this is where Zen reveals one of its most tender secrets. When you stop chasing special experiences and instead pour full awareness into the most ordinary actions, those actions begin to glow from the inside. Art, work, relationships, even the way you fold a blanket before sleep, can become expressions of this quiet awakening. Which is why, in the next step of the journey, Zen will walk with him from the meditation cushion into the world of tea bowls, bamboo, poetry, and the art of finding the sacred in the completely ordinary. He sometimes says that Zen sneaks into life through the side door of beauty. Not the polished beauty of magazine covers, but that quiet, humble beauty you only notice when you stop rushing. A cracked bowl that's been glued together, a single flower in a cheap glass, steam rising from a cup in a messy kitchen at midnight. Zen looks at all that and whispers, "This is enough. This is sacred as it is." The more he learned about Zen arts, the more he understood why they feel so calming. They don't scream for attention. They invite you to arrive. A Zen garden, for example, is mostly rocks, gravel, and a few plants. No flashy fountain, no overload of color, just space. Space for your eyes to rest, for your breathing to slow, for your nervous system to realize it doesn't need to be on high alert all the time. He likes the Japanese idea of wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and impermanence. In that world, a tea bowl with a crack repaired in gold isn't ruined. It's more precious. The scar is not hidden. It's highlighted. When he first heard that, he felt something soften inside. Imagine if we treated our own cracks like that, not as reasons to hide, but as signs of life, proof that we have been through storms and didn't disappear. One night, instead of scrolling, he made himself a little Zen experiment. No candles, no incense, no fancy gear, just a mug of tea. He decided to give that tea ceremony-level attention, feeling the warmth in his hands, watching the steam, noticing the smell before tasting. For 5 minutes, there were no problems to solve, no past to fix, no future to control. Just drink tea, be here. He was surprised at how deeply restful that felt. Zen calligraphy also fascinated him. One brush stroke, one breath, one chance. No undo button, no Ctrl+Z. The stroke is either alive or it isn't. The masters don't aim for perfect symmetry, they aim for presence. He began to see his own evenings like that. Each night is one brush stroke. You don't get yesterday back. You can't make tomorrow ahead of time. You only get this stroke, this night, this way of lying down. He noticed that Zen arts all share one secret rule. They're less about the object created and more about the state of the person creating it. A tea ceremony isn't about Instagram-worthy cups. It's about how present the host is while pouring. A garden isn't about impressing visitors. It's about shaping space so that everyone who enters can breathe differently. In that sense, your whole bedroom can quietly become a Zen artwork. He began to apply this to very ordinary tasks. Making his bed became a kind of silent ritual instead of a chore. Placing the pillow deliberately, smoothing the blanket with the palm of his hand. Aligning things just enough to feel calm, not obsessive. He realized he was no longer just preparing the bed. He was preparing a landing place for his own tired mind, like smoothing a runway for a small, fragile plane. Zen pottery gave him another powerful metaphor. Clay only becomes a bowl because it has emptiness inside. Without that empty space, it's just a lump. In the same way, he saw his days were completely full of tasks, noise, information, but empty of emptiness. No gaps, no pauses, no real silence. So at night, his mind had nowhere to put all that accumulated noise. It kept spinning because he hadn't given it any empty shelves during the day. So he started building tiny Zen frames into his routine, the way a painting has a frame that tells you, "Stop here, this is enough." A slow breath before opening a new app. 3 silent seconds before answering a message. A conscious pause at the door before entering his room at night, as if crossing into a different world. These small frames signaled to his nervous system that not every moment had to blend into the next in one endless blur. He also found that Zen arts welcome nature as a teacher, not a decoration. A single branch in a vase is chosen not because it's perfect, but because it expresses a season, a mood. He began to pay more attention to the weather outside his window before sleep, the rain, the wind, the stillness, and treat it like a quiet Zen painting life was showing him for free. It made his own problems feel less like the center of the universe. One very human habit Zen gently challenges is our addiction to more. More decoration, more noise, more stimulation. Zen rooms are often simple not because monks hate comfort, but because they discovered that too much visual and mental clutter keeps the mind restless. He took this seriously and slowly removed a few things from his nightstand. Extra objects, old cables, random stuff. The emptier it became, the easier it was for his attention to rest. He loves the Zen poem about a frog jumping into an old pond. Plop. No commentary, no analysis, just sound. That's the heart of Zen art. One clear moment, fully heard. He began to treat small night sounds that way, the hum of a fan, a car passing, a distant dog, as plops. Not as intrusions, but as tiny poems. Instead of tensing up, he listened. Sometimes, that was enough to keep worry from hijacking the whole night. Zen aesthetics also taught him that you don't need to renovate your whole life to feel more peace. Often, it's about subtracting, not adding, removing one unnecessary noise, one harsh light, one source of mental junk. He dimmed the lights earlier, chose softer colors, closed one extra tab in his mind and on his screen. It wasn't dramatic, but over time, those small edits created a gentler inner landscape. What surprised him most was how this artistic way of living started to change how he saw himself. If a cracked bowl can be beautiful, maybe his own hard nights were not proof of failure, but part of his texture. If a simple tea ceremony can be sacred, maybe brushing his teeth without rushing could also be a kind of prayer. Beauty wasn't something far away. It was hiding inside how he did the smallest things. Little by little, he realized Zen art is really training for Zen life. It teaches your nervous system to feel safe in simplicity, to appreciate imperfection, to rest inside ordinariness. And once you start seeing your evening as a kind of living artwork, something else becomes clear. If every gesture matters, then the way you fight with yourself, the way you chase sleep, the way you run from discomfort is also part of that art, which is exactly where Zen brings in one of its strangest tools, a kind of inner double bind to help you break free from your own mental knots. There's a kind of suffering that doesn't come from lack, but from contradiction. It's when life seems to whisper, "Be yourself," but only if your real self pleases everyone. Or, "Relax right now," or else, "You know that feeling? No matter what you do, you lose." It's like being told to fall asleep on command while a spotlight shines in your face. The more you try, the more impossible it becomes. He only learned the name double bind later. Before that, he just called it that awful mental knot where nothing I do feels right. When he heard Zen masters actually using this knot as a teaching tool, he was confused. Why would a compassionate teacher trap a student in an impossible situation? Over time, he realized they weren't being cruel. They were breaking an even deeper prison, the prison of the controlling, anxious me. A double bind happens when you receive two messages that cancel each other out. Be spontaneous. For example, the moment you try, you're no longer spontaneous. Or, you must love me freely. If it's forced, it isn't love. The mind spins. If I obey, I lose. If I disobey, I also lose. You can't solve it with logic because the contradiction is the point. It shows you the limits of trying to control everything with willpower. You see this a lot in relationships. A partner says, "Tell me the truth, I can handle it," but explodes when you're honest. Or at work, we want you to innovate, as long as nothing changes and nobody feels uncomfortable. On the surface, everyone sounds reasonable. Inside, you feel crazy. Your nervous system starts to live in permanent defense mode because no response feels truly safe. Zen points out that we do this inside our own heads all the time. You must be calm right now. You must stop being insecure. You mustn't care what others think, but make sure everyone respects you. Those are internal double binds. You become both the strict parent and the frightened child, arguing in the same mind. It's exhausting, especially when the lights go off and there's nowhere left to run. The Zen masters take this pattern and turn it into a mirror. A student comes and says, "Help me get rid of my ego." The master might reply, "Show me this ego first," or "Show me your true self." As soon as the student tries to present something, an attitude, a posture, a clever answer, it feels fake. If they don't try, that's also a choice. Everything becomes artificial. The student is pushed to the point where the idea of a solid controller starts to crack. He remembers reading the old Zen phrase about a mosquito trying to bite an iron bull. At first, he laughed. Then he realized the mosquito was him. He kept trying to bite into life with his strategies. Overthinking, planning, self-criticism, affirmations, self-help books. Sometimes they helped a bit, but when reality didn't obey, his little mosquito mind hit iron. The more he bit, the more tired and frustrated he became. The deeper point of the double bind is this: as long as you believe there is a separate little you who can finally get everything under control if you just try harder, you'll keep spinning. Zen uses the bind to push you to the limit of that belief. When you reach a point where there truly is nothing you can do to force awakening, peace, or perfect control, something surprising can happen. You stop pretending to be the absolute ruler of the universe. Desire is the perfect example. We hear, desire causes suffering, so get rid of desire. Immediately, a new desire is born. I want to be desireless. You sit on the cushion burning with the desire to destroy desire. You get angry at yourself for wanting things. You feel proud when you want less than others. It's desire playing dress up as spirituality. The double bind reveals the joke. Trying not to desire is still desire. He went through a period where his whole life was one big spiritual double bind. He thought, if I meditate enough, eat perfectly, read the right books, I'll become pure and peaceful. Every failure, missing a session, eating something wrong, feeling anxious, became proof he was failing the path. He was supposedly following a path of liberation, but inside he felt more trapped, more judged, more tense than ever. Insomnia, he realized, is one of the clearest examples of the double bind. The mind says, "You must sleep now, or tomorrow will be a disaster." That pressure sends stress hormones through the body. The body, sensing danger, stays alert. The more you demand sleep, the more sleep feels like an enemy, just out of reach. You end up lying in bed, exhausted and wired, trapped between "I can't sleep" and "I must sleep." Zen doesn't solve this by giving you a new command like "stop wanting to sleep." That would just add another layer to the knot. Instead, it invites a different move. What if you drop out of the argument entirely? Not by escaping into your phone or numbing yourself, but by changing your relationship to the whole situation. If sleep comes, it comes. If it doesn't, I can still rest in awareness. It sounds simple, but it's a radical shift. He experimented with this himself. On nights when sleep wouldn't come, instead of tightening around the thought, "I'm ruined tomorrow," he began to treat the situation like a Zen koan he wasn't meant to solve. He focused on resting the body as if he were already asleep. Soft jaw, heavy limbs, slow breath. He told himself, "I'm allowed to just lie here and not win or lose." Sometimes sleep came quickly. Sometimes it didn't. But the torture reduced. There's a strange peace when you finally reach the mosquito on Iron Bull moment in any area of life. You discover there's nothing you can do and nothing you cannot do to control everything. You can act wisely, yes. You can care, yes. But you can't guarantee that the universe will obey your timetable. The double bind, instead of being a trap, becomes a doorway out of the illusion that you're the sole manager of reality. This also changes how you approach spiritual practice itself. If you meditate to become enlightened and superior, the very practice that could free you instead tightens your ego. If you use Zen as a way to confirm, "I'm more advanced than others," you're missing the point completely. It's what the masters meant by, "When the wrong person uses the right method works in the wrong way." He began to shift from, "How do I use this practice to get somewhere?" to, "What is this practice showing me about where I am right now?" Instead of asking, "How close am I to awakening?" he started asking, "How am I relating to this breath, this feeling, this thought?" That tiny change, from control to curiosity, dissolved a lot of invisible double binds he'd been carrying around for years. A simple exercise helped him. Whenever he felt stuck, he'd grab a notebook and write both sides of the bind. "I must relax. I can't relax. I want connection. I'm terrified of connection. I want silence. I'm addicted to stimulation." Just seeing the contradiction on paper sometimes created a small crack of humor and tenderness. "Of course I'm tired," he'd think. "Look at the tug of war I'm hosting inside." With that crack, a new possibility appears. Instead of choosing one side, you can step slightly back and watch the whole rope being pulled. The bind doesn't vanish instantly, but it stops being your entire identity. You're no longer the knot. You're the awareness noticing the knot. And from that awareness, a softer, wiser relationship with rules, beliefs, and even religion itself starts to emerge. One where spiritual forms are no longer walls, but rafts you can use and then gently set aside when you reach the other shore. He remembers the first time he heard the phrase, "religion of no religion." It sounded like a spiritual prank. How can something be a religion and not a religion at the same time? But the more he walked with Buddhism, the more this paradox began to feel strangely accurate. Zen doesn't tear down religion. It simply refuses to let you get stuck in the walls of it. He likes to think of religion as a raft. If you're drowning in the middle of a river, a raft is life-saving. It gives structure, direction, and support. Rituals, teachings, prayers, all of these are planks in that raft. The problem begins when, after reaching the other shore, people insist on carrying the raft on their back through the forest, proudly dragging it everywhere they go. In Buddhism, the Buddha is very clear. The raft is for crossing, not for worshiping. He sees how many people spend their whole lives repainting the raft, arguing which raft is best, or defending the raft against imaginary enemies on the opposite shore. Meanwhile, the simple question, am I actually crossing this river of suffering, quietly gets forgotten under layers of debate and identity. Zen's no religion doesn't mean no depth. It means not confusing the finger with the moon. The rituals, chants, robes, statues, they can all be beautiful and helpful, but they're still fingers pointing, not the moon itself. When someone becomes obsessed with the finger, memorizing every wrinkle and angle, Zen gently taps their shoulder and says, "Hey, look up." He remembers walking into a Zen temple for the first time, expecting fireworks and mystical vibes. Instead, he saw people sweeping, washing dishes, sitting, bowing. It felt almost disappointingly ordinary. Later, he realized that this was the no religion part in action. Less drama, more presence, less spectacle, more sincerity in small movements. One of his favorite Zen images is from the 10 Ox Herding Pictures, a series of paintings about spiritual development. At the end, after all the stages of searching, taming, and seeing the ox, which represents our true nature, the final image doesn't show someone levitating or glowing. It shows a person returning to the marketplace, smiling, carrying wine, completely ordinary. That last picture changed something in him. It suggested that real awakening doesn't separate you from life. It drops you more deeply into it. You don't move to a special mountain and float above the world. You go back to town, buy vegetables, talk to neighbors, pay bills, listen to crying children. But from a place that isn't constantly drowning in fear and ego. Zen also talks about the bodhisattva, someone who could leave the wheel of suffering but chooses to stay to help others. He loves that image because it destroys the idea of spirituality as a selfish escape. It's not about building a private bubble of peace and leaving everyone else to burn. The religion of no religion says your awakening isn't complete if it doesn't flow into compassion. He often uses a modern analogy. Imagine someone who studies mental health, therapy, mindfulness, reads every book, and then uses all that knowledge only to feel superior. They understand anxiety, but never sit with a friend who's panicking. They talk about trauma, but never offer a single practical kindness. That's carrying the raft on your back. Impressive, but not useful. One of the most shocking Zen sayings is, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. Of course, they don't mean literal harm. The Buddha here is any fixed image of enlightenment you cling to. The moment you think, this is exactly what awakening must look like, you stop seeing what's actually alive in front of you. Zen is ruthless about cutting these inner idols down. He realized he had his own version of that idol. He pictured an awakened him who was always calm, never anxious, never jealous, never tired. Every time he didn't match that fantasy, he judged himself harshly. One day, it hit him. This perfect spiritual self was just another character his mind had invented. That was the Buddha on the road he needed to kill. In the religion of no religion, Even meditation isn't sacred in itself. It's not a trophy to brag about. I meditate 2 hours a day. Zen asks a more embarrassing question. After all that sitting, how do you treat people? How do you handle frustration in traffic? How do you speak to someone who disagrees with you? If practice doesn't touch those places, it's just another costume. He saw this clearly once in a retreat. There were people who meditated beautifully in the hall, perfectly still, eyes half closed, almost statues. But in the dining area, a few snapped at volunteers or acted superior. Others were clumsy in meditation, but incredibly kind, patient, and gentle with everyone. He left with a simple insight. It's better to have a soft heart and a noisy mind than a quiet mind and a hard heart. The no-religion side of Zen is also a big relief for people who feel allergic to dogma. You don't have to sign a contract promising to believe in specific metaphysical details. Zen is more like an invitation. Try this, sit like this, breathe like this. Watch your mind. See what happens. The authority isn't in a distant sky, but in your own honest experience. At the same time, Zen quietly warns against becoming arrogant about being spiritual but not religious. That can become its own religion, worshiping your independence, despising anything that looks traditional. He smiles when he sees that in himself. The religion of no religion includes respecting forms when they help and dropping them when they don't, not just rejecting everything to feel special. He came to see spiritual forms like training wheels on a bicycle. When you're learning, they're incredibly helpful. They let you taste movement without falling hard every time. But if you refuse to ever take them off, you'll never discover your full balance. If you rip them off too soon, just to prove you're advanced, you'll crash more than you need to. Zen's wisdom is in sensing when to use them and when to let them go. When you bring this into daily life, something beautiful happens. A prayer, a chant, a bow, a moment of silence before bed. These can all be rafts, helping you cross tonight's river of restlessness. But you don't mistake them for magic spells. The real sacred thing isn't the form itself. It's the quality of awareness you bring to it and how it shapes the way you show up tomorrow. And as he explored this religion of no religion, he noticed something else. In a world drowning in noise, information, and digital rituals we never question, Zen's simple, flexible approach feels incredibly modern. It doesn't ask you to escape technology or culture, but to bring this same awake, questioning spirit right into the heart of the hyper-connected world you're actually living in, where your phone, your habits, and your attention have quietly become some of the most powerful temples of your daily life. He says if the Buddha lived today, he wouldn't be walking between palaces and forests. He'd be walking between notification bubbles and silence, between the blue light of a screen and the darkness of a quiet room. The palace of pleasure is now an infinite feed. The forest of asceticism might be isolating yourself with self-help rules and productivity obsessions. The middle way sits somewhere between always online and I must disappear from the world. He noticed how many people say they don't have time to take care of their minds, yet somehow have time to check their phones over 100 times a day. He's not judging. He caught himself doing the same thing. A tiny buzz, a little ping, and there he was again, pulled out of the present. It's not weakness, it's design. Entire industries are built on slicing your attention into pieces. Zen feels almost rebellious in this context. It doesn't ask you to throw away your phone and move to a cave. It asks a more uncomfortable question. Who owns your attention right now? Not in theory, but in this exact breath. when you pick up your phone in the dark instead of letting your eyes close. Is that a free choice or a reflex someone else programmed into you? He remembers lying in bed one night, exhausted, phone in hand, scrolling through strangers' lives. At some point, he realized he had no idea what he'd just seen for the last 10 minutes. His thumb was moving, but his awareness was gone. It felt like eating without tasting. In that moment, Zen's simplest instruction landed. Be where you are, or at least notice that you're not. He started doing a tiny experiment. Before unlocking his phone at night, he would pause for one breath and ask, "What am I hoping this will give me right now?" Distraction, comfort, connection, a hit of dopamine? Sometimes he still opened it. Sometimes he didn't. But slowly, he stopped lying to himself that he was just checking something. That honesty alone brought back a bit of freedom. One of the most powerful gifts Zen gives to the modern world is this. It separates pain from suffering. Pain is the raw sensation, tiredness, sadness, a difficult day. Suffering is the story we build on top. This always happens to me. I'm broken. It will never change. Social media, news, and constant comparison pour fuel on those stories. Zen, quietly, teaches you how to see them as stories again, not as absolute truth. From a mental health point of view, he sees Zen as a kind of internal physiotherapy. Not a miracle cure, but training. Sitting with your breath for even 10 minutes is like going to the gym for your attention. You're teaching your mind that it can stay with one thing without being yanked away every second. In a world built to fragment your awareness, that's not a small skill. It's survival. He noticed that when he practiced regularly, his anxiety didn't magically disappear, but its shape changed. Instead of being a huge fog swallowing everything, it became more like a visiting weather pattern. Ah, anxiety is here today. That small distance between I am anxious and I have anxiety present may sound like wordplay, but in Zen terms, it's the difference between drowning in the ocean and noticing you're standing in water up to your chest. Relationships, too, start to shift under this kind of awareness. Modern life encourages what he calls half-presence. Talking while checking notifications, listening while mentally drafting replies, sitting together while each person lives in a private digital universe. Zen doesn't turn you into a saint overnight, but it keeps tapping your shoulder, reminding you, there is a real human being in front of you right now. Are you actually with them? He tried something simple with people he loved. When they spoke, he put the phone face down and gave them his eyes, not just his ears. At first, it felt dramatic, even awkward, like a scene from a movie. But the reactions were subtle and deep. People relaxed. They opened up more. It wasn't mystical. It was just rare. In a world of divided attention, full presence feels like a luxury gift. At work, Zen helped him question a dangerous modern belief. My value equals my productivity. That formula is a straight road to burnout. He began to experiment with focused single-tasking blocks, bringing the same quality of attention from meditation to emails, projects, even boring spreadsheets. He discovered something almost embarrassing. When he truly focused, he finished things faster, made fewer mistakes, and felt less drained than when he was anxious. Multitasking, he also noticed how often burnout isn't just about workload, but about the inner commentary. You're behind. You're not enough. Everyone else is doing better. Zen doesn't argue with these voices. It shines a light on them. It teaches you to hear them as sounds in the mind, not orders from a god. Over time, you can respond with a bit more kindness. I hear you. but I'm doing what I can, step by step. Of course, Zen isn't a replacement for therapy, medication, or professional help when needed. He's very clear about that, but he's also seen how meditation and mindful living make those other supports more effective. When you're a bit more aware of your triggers, your patterns, your stories, you can explain them better to a therapist, use your tools more skillfully, and notice earlier when things are slipping. He's honest. Sometimes, Zen feels almost too simple for such a complicated world. Sit, breathe, notice. How can that compete with algorithms, crises, and constant crises? But when he actually does it, he sees why ancient teachers trusted these simple practices. They don't fix the world outside. They give you a stable place to stand inside yourself, so you're not just a puppet of every external push and pull. He also started to recognize how much of his spiritual searching was actually another form of distraction. More books, more techniques, more teachers. The spiritual version of scrolling. Zen gently suggested a harder question. Are you using growth as another way not to feel what's here now? Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't to learn a new method, but to sit still with the uncomfortable feelings already knocking at the door. For him, the modern relevance of Zen boils down to this. It trains you to stay human in environments designed to turn you into a reaction machine. When you reclaim even a small piece of your attention, your breath, your evening routine, you're quietly rebelling against a system that wants you exhausted, impulsive, and endlessly hungry. You're saying, I remember what it feels like to simply be. And yet, even this ability to pause and breathe doesn't touch one of the deepest truths Zen insists we face sooner or later. The one reality no amount of productivity, distraction, or even meditation can erase. That everything we love, including our own body, is changing, aging, and moving toward an end. It's there, like a quiet shadow behind every busy day and restless night, waiting for us to finally turn and look at it with open eyes. He remembers the first time death stopped being a theory and became a room. White walls, the beep of a machine, someone he loved breathing in a strange rhythm. No philosophy helped in that moment. No positive thinking quote made sense. All the clever ideas about life suddenly felt small in the presence of that final exhale. It was there he realized most people live as if death is a rumor, not a certainty. Zen doesn't hide from this. It walks straight toward it, but with a very different attitude from the morbid fear he grew up around. Instead of using death to scare people into behaving, Zen uses it as a mirror. Look, it says gently, this is what makes every moment non-negotiably precious. When you stop pretending you're immortal, the way you answer messages, eat dinner, hug someone, changes. In some Zen traditions, monks used to meditate in cemeteries, not to torture themselves, but to strip away illusion. Imagine sitting quietly, feeling your own warm breath, while surrounded by the undeniable truth that bodies do not last. It sounds extreme, but underneath there's a very simple question. If this could be my last week, is this really how I want to treat myself and the people around me? He once asked a Zen teacher, how do I prepare for death? Expecting a long, mystical answer, the teacher just replied, learn how to fully live this day. At first, he felt cheated. He wanted secret techniques, special mantras. But later, lying awake at night, he understood. If he couldn't be present for this breath, this pillow, this heartbeat, why would he suddenly become wise and peaceful at the last breath? There's a story of a hospice nurse who practiced Zen and sat with a man in his final hours. She didn't fill the room with spiritual lectures. She didn't force optimism. She just breathed with him, held his hand, and stayed. At one point, he whispered, "Thank you for not being afraid to be here." That sentence stayed with him for years. Sometimes the deepest gift you can offer is not fixing, but not fleeing. Zen invites everyone to practice this in small, practical ways long before a hospital room. Sitting with your own discomfort for a few minutes instead of instantly distracting yourself. Staying in a hard conversation instead of running to your phone. Allowing sadness to wash through you without immediately explaining it away. Each time you do this, you're rehearsing for that bigger goodbye. Learning how to stay when things get real. Our culture often sells a war against aging. Creams, surgeries, filters, slogans like 40 is the new 20. Zen quietly smiles at that panic. It doesn't glorify decay, but it respects it. A withered leaf in a Zen garden isn't trash. It's part of the composition. In the same way, wrinkles, gray hair, slower steps can become reminders that time is sculpting us, not just stealing from us. He likes to say, you can grow old like a dried out sponge or like a burning candle. The sponge gets harder, more bitter, soaking up grievances and never releasing them. The candle burns from both ends, fully alive, giving light until the last drop of wax is gone. He's met older people on both sides. Some radiate a kind of soft, deep warmth. Others radiate complaints and regret. Zen gently asks, which sculpture are you becoming, day by day? He's seen how chasing immortality through achievements or possessions backfires. People build empires, then panic when they realize empires crumble too. Others cling desperately to their health routines, not because they love being alive, but because they're terrified of not existing. Zen doesn't mock that fear. It turns toward it and says, what exactly are you afraid will disappear? That question changed his own relationship with death. He realized he was less afraid of physical pain and more afraid of unfinishedness, unsaid apologies, unlived dreams, love he was too proud or busy to express. So he made a quiet practice. Once in a while, he'd ask himself, if tonight was my last night, what conversation would I hate to leave undone? Then he'd send the message, make the call, or at least write the truth down. There's a Zen saying, die before you die. It doesn't mean harm yourself. It means let the false things die early. Let the image you're trying desperately to project die. Let the grudges die. Let the story that you're unworthy die. Each time a false identity collapses, it hurts a little, but something freer appears underneath. That's the kind of dying Zen encourages, the death of illusion, not of the body. He remembers one particularly rough year when everything seemed to be falling apart. Relationships, plans, health. Part of him felt like he was being erased. In desperation, he sat one night and whispered, okay, if everything I thought I was has to die, what if I don't fight it? He didn't see angels. He didn't levitate. But he did feel a strange lightness, like setting down a backpack he'd forgotten he was carrying. From that point, the question, what if I die, slowly transformed into, how alive am I willing to be while I'm here? It's a subtle but powerful shift. Instead of spending energy rehearsing worst-case scenarios, he began investing energy into small acts of aliveness. Honest conversations, creative projects, being fully present with his morning coffee instead of drinking it inside tomorrow's worries. This doesn't mean he stopped fearing death entirely. Fear still visits, especially at night when the room gets quiet. and the mind starts telling old stories. The difference is, now he has somewhere to put that fear. Instead of stuffing it down or letting it explode, he can invite it to sit beside him like a guest. You're here? Okay, let's breathe together. Oddly, fear calms down when it's not treated like a monster or a master. He also noticed something beautiful. When people accept impermanence, they usually become kinder, not colder. If you know you won't have unlimited chances to love someone, you're more likely to listen fully when they talk. You're more likely to forgive faster, to say, "I'm sorry," and "I love you," without waiting for the perfect moment. Mortality, instead of making life meaningless, makes every small gesture heavy with meaning. Zen doesn't promise that thinking about death will make you sleep like a baby. Sometimes it will stir up old fears. But facing it consciously, instead of pushing it away, often removes a hidden background tension that you didn't even know was there. Like turning on a light in a dark room. The shadows are still strange, but at least you see what's furniture and what's just imagination. And as he kept walking this path, sitting with impermanence, watching people arrive and depart from his life, he began to see another layer of Zen wisdom. Death isn't the only thing we misunderstand. We also misunderstand ourselves. We cling to fixed images of who I am and who you are, then suffer when reality doesn't match. So naturally, the next step in his journey was learning how Zen helps us see beyond our stories about ourselves and others, opening space for relationships, love and connection to become something much more real than the old roles we keep replaying. He noticed one day that he didn't actually relate to people. He related to his stories about people. She's always dramatic. He never listens. They're selfish. Those labels felt like shortcuts, a way to navigate life faster. But something subtle was happening. The more certain he was about who others are, the less space they had to ever surprise him, or grow, or simply have a bad day without being sentenced for life. Zen calls this living in a world of shadows. Not ghosts or spirits, but mental shadows. Ideas about people, memories, assumptions. Instead of meeting the person in front of you, you meet a projection built from 10 moments out of thousands. It's like watching a movie on top of reality and forgetting the screen is yours. Zen doesn't punish you for this. It just keeps asking, are you absolutely sure your story is the whole truth? He remembers a couple who went to a kind of Zen-inspired relationship retreat. They were on the edge of divorce. Years of arguments, resentments, unsaid things. One exercise sounded almost silly. Sit and look into each other's eyes for 5 minutes in silence. No phones, no words, no roles. Later, the husband said, stunned, "I saw my wife for the first time in years. Not the enemy in my head, a person." That story hit him hard because he realized he'd been doing the same thing, not only with others, but with himself. He had a story. I'm the one who always messes things up. A script he could recite by heart. Every mistake became evidence. Every success was dismissed as luck. Zen offered him a strange invitation. Watch the storyteller. Don't argue with it. Don't obey it. Just watch it talk. We all know that inner narrator, the one he calls the sports commentator of your life. It says, there you go again. Nobody cares. You'll never change. If a friend spoke to you like that, you'd stop hanging out with them. But inside your head, that voice sounds like truth. Zen practice trains you to hear it as just another sound, like the hum of a fridge, not a divine voice issuing commands. He started a small practice. When that inner critic spoke, he'd ask, who is hearing this? The question didn't fix everything instantly, but it did something important. It created a tiny gap. He wasn't only the voice saying, "You're not enough." He was also the awareness that heard that sentence. Awareness is like a sky. Thoughts are like clouds. Clouds can be dark and heavy, but they never become the sky itself. In relationships, this shift changes everything. When someone irritates you, instead of immediately reacting, you can notice the story forming. She's disrespecting me. He doesn't care. They're attacking me. Just that noticing buys you a few seconds. Enough time to ask, is there another way to see this? Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're scared. Maybe it's not about you at all. Those few seconds can save hours of conflict. He likes a simple Zen story about two monks walking on a muddy road. They see a young woman in a silk kimono stuck at a puddle. One monk lifts her, carries her across, and they continue walking. Hours later, the other monk bursts out, "We're not supposed to touch women, especially beautiful ones. Why did you do that?" The first monk answers, "I left her by the puddle hours ago. Why are you still carrying her?" That story became a mirror for how long he carried small hurts. Someone cut him off in traffic. He carried them all morning. A message was left on "seen." He carried it for days. A comment on social media. He carried it for weeks. The event lasted seconds. The story lasted much longer. Zen invited him to gently ask, "How many people am I still carrying in my mind who walked away a long time ago?" This doesn't mean becoming naive or tolerating abuse. Zen isn't telling you to stay in harmful situations. It's teaching you to distinguish between what's happening now and what your past is screaming about it. Sometimes the most Zen move is to set a clear boundary and step away. But even then, you do it from clarity, not from a storm of recycled stories. He also noticed how often he used stories to protect himself from vulnerability. "People always leave" is painful, but it's also safe. If you believe it completely, you never have to risk deep connection. Zen, with its gentle cruelty, whispers, "What if this story is half true at best?" When you question it, you open a door. Loving still hurts sometimes, but at least the hurt belongs to this relationship, not to ghosts from 10 years ago. A powerful exercise he tried was this. In a conflict, instead of repeating, "You are," sentences, he tried, "The story I'm telling myself is," for example, instead of "You don't care about me," he'd say, "The story I'm telling myself is that you don't care, because you didn't answer my message." That one extra step, naming it as a story, gave the other person space to respond without immediately being cast as the villain. Zen also encourages beginner's mind in relationships, meeting people as if for the first time, even if you've known them for years. Of course, you don't erase history, but you allow the possibility that today they might show a new side. He practiced this with family members he'd already put in rigid boxes. The critical one, the irresponsible one. To his surprise, when he softened his lens, they started to change in front of him. Seeing beyond stories doesn't turn life into a fairy tale. People still lie, disappoint, surprise, love, and leave. You still get triggered. You still misread situations. But with practice, fewer explosions are fueled by assumptions. More conversations come from curiosity. "What did you mean?" replaces, "I know exactly what you meant." That alone can make home feel less like a battlefield and more like a place where humans are allowed to be imperfect. This inner work also spills into how you see yourself at the end of the day. Lying in bed, replaying failures. He started asking, If I talk to a child the way I talk to myself, would that child grow or shrink? The answer was obvious. So he experimented with a new inner tone, still honest, but less vicious. Not, "You're pathetic," but, "You're tired and learning." Small shift, big impact on sleep and self-respect. Little by little, he realized that Zen isn't trying to erase your personality or your history. It's helping you hold all your stories more lightly. They become useful maps, not prisons. You can say, "I tend to be anxious," without turning it into, "I am anxiety." You can say, "We've had conflicts," without turning it into, "We are doomed." And from that softer place, something beautiful happens. Creativity wakes up, not only in art, but in how you work, solve problems, and even design your days, turning life itself into a kind of flexible, living practice instead of a rigid script you must obey. He used to think creativity belonged to a chosen few, the painter with paint on their shirt, the musician lost in sound, the writer in a cafe with a fancy notebook. Everyone else, he thought, just had a job. It took Zen to whisper something different in his ear. Every human being is creating all the time. Not just songs and paintings, but days, conversations, habits, whole lives. Zen doesn't talk about being creative the way social media does. It doesn't care how many followers you have or whether you've written a bestseller. Instead, it asks, what is the quality of your presence while you do what you do? A parent helping with homework, a barista making coffee, a developer writing code. Each one is shaping reality in small but real ways. That's creativity, whether you call it that or not. He discovered that his most creative work didn't happen when he forced inspiration. It came in those moments when he stopped dramatizing and just paid attention to the keyboard, to the sound of the rain, to the feeling in his chest. Zen calls this just doing, just writing, just cooking, just cleaning, not as a punishment, but as a doorway into a state where life flows through you instead of being squeezed out by pressure. Zen arts like calligraphy, pottery, or the tea ceremony look almost boring from the outside. A brush stroke, a bowl, a cup of tea. But the training behind them is brutal in its simplicity. Repeat a movement thousands of times until your ego gets bored and steps aside. At that point, the brush, the hand, the paper, the ink, and the person are no longer in competition. They move together. He loves the idea of controlled accident. The Zen potter doesn't micromanage every grain of clay. They learn the rules of the material, how it reacts to heat, pressure, water. Then they let the kiln, gravity, and time have their say. The result isn't perfect in the Instagram sense. It's alive. A crack appears, a curve goes slightly off, and somehow that's where the beauty hides. In modern life, perfectionism is often sold as a virtue. Zen sees it as a creativity killer. When you're terrified of making mistakes, you don't experiment. You don't risk. You recycle safe ideas. He noticed this in his own work. The more he tried to impress, the more stiff and robotic his projects became. When he allowed himself to make ugly first drafts, he suddenly had something real to refine. He started applying Zen's beginner's mind to his job. Instead of walking into tasks thinking, "Ugh, I already know this, it's boring," he pretended it was his first day on Earth. What is this software really doing? How does this customer actually feel? What problem is this email solving? That simple shift turned repetitive work into a laboratory where curiosity was allowed back into the room. One of his biggest discoveries was that multitasking is creativity's enemy. The mind feels busy. but it's actually fragmented. Zen gently pushes in the opposite direction, one thing at a time. When he wrote, he just wrote. When he edited, he just edited. When he answered messages, he didn't also scroll the news. Strangely enough, he got more done and felt less drained. Quality replaced chaos. He found that even the way he organized his desk could become a Zen practice. Not obsessive minimalism, but intentionality. Do the objects around me support clarity or promote confusion? A clean mug, a notepad, a pen that actually works. These small choices became quiet signals to his mind. We're here. We're doing one thing. Let's give it our best shot. Creativity also shows up in how you solve problems. When something goes wrong, the old habit is to panic or blame. A Zen-informed approach pauses and asks, what's really happening? What are all the factors? What can be learned here? It's like moving from reacting with fists clenched to responding with open hands. Same problem, different nervous system handling it. He met people who swore they weren't creative, then watched them cook without a recipe, comfort a friend with exactly the right words, or fix a broken appliance using pure improvisation. Zen would say, that's it. That's the spark. You don't need a studio to be an artist. Your life is the studio. How you combine your skills, your temperament, your environment. That's your art form. There's also the creativity of saying no. Modern life dangles endless options. Courses, hobbies, shows, side hustles. Without awareness, you spread yourself so thin that nothing goes deep. Zen's love for simplicity taught him that every yes is a brushstroke on the canvas of his day. Too many random strokes, and it becomes mud. A few clear ones, repeated, and a picture appears. He began scheduling white space into his day, moments with no agenda, no screen, no objective, just walking, or staring out the window, or quietly breathing. At first, he felt guilty, as if he were wasting time, but those empty spaces became the birthplace of his best ideas. The mind, finally unchained, started connecting dots in ways it never could when flooded with constant input. Even housework, which he once resented, turned into a kind of moving meditation. Washing dishes wasn't something in the way of my life anymore. For 10 minutes, it was his life. Warm water, the clink of plates, the rhythm of scrubbing. In that attentive state, random insights would arise, solutions to problems he'd been chewing on for days. Creativity loves calm, not chaos. He also realized that creativity isn't just about what you produce, but how you handle blocks. Instead of saying, I'm stuck, I'm useless, he started asking, what part of me is afraid right now? Maybe it was fear of judgment, fear of failure, or even fear of success. By acknowledging the fear instead of wrestling it in the dark, he freed up energy to take one small step anyway. Over time, his whole relationship with work shifted from, how do I prove myself, to, how can I give something honest and useful here? That subtle change turned his tasks into a field of practice. The email, the design, the small act of help, all became brush strokes of the same artwork, the kind of person he was becoming. And that naturally opened up another uncomfortable but beautiful question Zen always brings to the table. If every action is part of your life's artwork, how do you decide what is right, what is kind, and what kind of impact you want that artwork to have on other people and on the world around you? He used to think ethics was about fear. Fear of punishment, fear of being wrong, fear of going to some awful place after death. Rules felt like invisible fences. Step outside, and something terrible will happen. When he met Zen, the tone was different. There were guidelines, yes, but instead of obey or else, the message sounded more like, look closely and see what your actions do to your heart, to other people, to the world. Zen doesn't give you a long list of commandments carved in stone. It offers something more uncomfortable: responsibility. It says, you're not a child who needs a cosmic policeman. You're an adult being invited to see clearly. Instead of asking, is this allowed? Zen asks, what is this action creating in me and around me? That question is harder to escape, but it's also more freeing. He once heard a simple formula: do good, avoid harm, clean your mind. A student complained. That's so simple, even a child could understand it. The teacher smiled and replied, yes, and even an 80-year-old struggles to practice it. That landed deeply. Ethics isn't a lack of information. We know we shouldn't lie, hurt, or betray. The real challenge is bringing our actions in line with what we already know, especially when we're tired, stressed, or scared. Zen ethics grows naturally from one core insight: we are not as separate as we think. When you really feel, even for a second, that other people's pain is not completely separate from yours, cruelty stops being interesting. Gossip loses its flavor. Revenge feels heavy instead of satisfying. Compassion stops being a moral duty and becomes common sense, like not punching your own arm. He saw this in small, everyday situations. Standing in a long line, everyone restless, a cashier clearly overwhelmed. Old him might have rolled his eyes or snapped. Zen him still felt impatient, but he watched the impatience rise and fall like a wave. Instead of feeding it, he took a breath and said to the cashier, "Hey, you're doing great. Must be a rough shift." Her shoulders dropped a little. One human being felt seen. That's ethics, Zen style, not dramatic, but deeply human. Zen doesn't demand perfection. You're going to say dumb things, make selfish choices, hurt people unintentionally. The question is, what you do after. He started practicing something awkward and powerful: quick apologies. Instead of waiting weeks to say, "I'm sorry," he tried to catch himself sooner. "I spoke from stress, not from my true self. That's on me." At first it bruised his pride, then it strengthened his backbone. Money and work are huge ethical playgrounds. In a culture that rewards squeezing as much as possible from others for personal gain, Zen quietly asks, is success that leaves you empty inside really success? He knew a businessman who downsized his lifestyle not because he hated comfort, but because he wanted to stop building a life around constant pressure and hidden compromises. Fewer deals, more integrity; less revenue, more sleep; and, strangely, more respect from others and from himself. Zen also shines a light on soft lies, the ones we tell to make life smoother. Pretending we're fine when we're not. Saying yes when we mean no. Ghosting people instead of having hard conversations. These lies don't send you to prison, but they slowly erode trust, especially self-trust. He began experimenting with gentle honesty. "I can't promise that. I'm too tired tonight. That comment hurt me." Not dramatic, just real. Relationships became messier on the surface, but deeper underneath. Another important part of Zen ethics is how you consume, not only food or objects, but information. Doom scrolling, gossip, outrage content. They all feed the mind with a diet of agitation. Zen asks you to notice, not as a moral judgment, but as an experiment. How do I feel after 30 minutes of this? If the answer is angry, empty, numb, maybe that's your inner compass begging for a different choice. He noticed that people often use spirituality to escape responsibility. Everything is an illusion, so nothing matters. Zen calls that out quickly. If nothing mattered, why would the Buddha spend his life teaching? Why would Zen masters risk their lives standing against injustice or helping those in need? Awakening doesn't make you indifferent. It makes you more sensitive. You don't float above suffering. You feel it more sharply and respond more wisely. He likes to imagine ethics as hygiene for the heart. Just as you brush your teeth, not because someone threatens you, but because you like the feeling of cleanliness. You act ethically because it keeps your inner world clear. Lie, cheat, manipulate, and you feel a sticky residue inside. Tell the truth. Keep your word as much as possible. Choose kindness when you can. And there's a lightness, even on hard days. One powerful question he started using at night, before sleep, was, if everyone lived exactly as I live today, thought what I thought, spoke how I spoke, consumed what I consumed, would the world be a little better or a little worse? It's a confronting question. Some nights the answer hurt, but instead of drowning in guilt, he treated it like feedback. Okay, tomorrow I'll adjust 1 degree. Zen ethics isn't about grand gestures only. Yes, there are people who dedicate their lives to activism, service, or healing work. But the everyday choices matter just as much. How you talk about someone who isn't in the room, how you treat someone who can't offer you anything, how you behave when no one is watching. Ethics is what you do when applause is impossible. Over time, he saw that acting in line with his deeper values didn't make life easier, but it made it simpler. Fewer lies to remember, fewer fake personas to maintain, fewer contracts with guilt. That simplicity brought its own peace, especially at night. Instead of replaying a highlight reel of regrets, he could rest in the feeling, I wasn't perfect, but I tried to live honestly today. Zen has also inspired a lot of engaged action in the world. People using mindfulness not just to calm themselves, but to face climate crisis, inequality, violence, and injustice with clarity instead of blind rage. Not to escape the world, but to stand in it with less hatred and more courage. Because once you start cleaning your own mind and heart, a new question appears almost automatically. Given who I am and where I am, how can I help, even in small, humble ways? And exactly there, at this intersection of awareness and action, something else wakes up inside him. The realization that taking care of his own mind is not selfish at all. It's preparation, because the calmer, clearer, and kinder his inner world becomes, the more equipped he is to handle storms, support others, and navigate his own mental health challenges without drowning in them, which leads naturally into another deep layer of this path. How Zen meets anxiety, depression, and the very real emotional pain so many people carry quietly into their beds at night. He knows what it's like to lie in bed with the lights off while the mind refuses to switch off. The room is quiet, but inside there's a storm. Old conversations, future disasters, what-ifs playing on loop. The body is tired, yet the brain behaves like it just had 3 coffees. In those moments, phrases like, just relax, feel almost insulting. If it were that simple, he'd have done it already. Zen doesn't pretend anxiety or depression are just bad thoughts you can cancel with a quote. It treats them like weather systems moving through the inner sky. Not your fault, not a personal failure, but also not your entire identity. Rain is real. It can soak you to the bone. But no matter how hard it falls, It's still just rain, not the sky itself. That distinction changes everything. He started by learning to name what was happening, instead of becoming it. Instead of, I am anxious, he tried, anxiety is present. It sounds like a small tweak, but it moved him from being inside the storm to watching it through a window, when the inner voice screamed, you'll always feel like this. A gentler part of him could say, that's just a sentence. Let's see what's actually here in the body. Zen invites you to zoom in on the physical sensations instead of the story. Where does anxiety live right now? In the chest, the throat, the stomach. Is it tight, hot, buzzing, heavy? When he did this, the monster became a series of moving sensations. Not pleasant, but less mystical, less demon, more electric storm. That gave him something concrete to breathe with. For depression, the trap often wasn't panic, but emptiness. A heavy flatness, as if all colors had been drained from the day. Zen didn't tell him, just think positive. It invited him to sit beside that heaviness like a quiet friend, to notice small details even inside the gray. The feeling of the blanket, a distant sound, the way light falls in one corner of the room, not to romanticize the pain, but to remember that even in numbness, life is still happening. He discovered that one of the cruelest parts of mental suffering is the shame on top. I shouldn't feel this way. Other people handle more. A spiritual person wouldn't be like this. Zen punched those thoughts gently in the face. It whispered, a suffering mind is not a failed mind. It's just a mind that's overwhelmed. That compassion didn't cure anything overnight, but it removed a layer of self-hatred from the pile. At the same time, Zen is honest. Meditation isn't a magic pill. Sometimes sitting quietly makes the noise feel louder at first. That's why he always says, Zen and therapy are teammates, not rivals. A good therapist can help you untangle old knots. Zen helps you notice how those knots tighten in real time. Medication can stabilize chemistry. Zen can stabilize awareness. Each has its place. He remembers telling a Zen teacher, when I sit to meditate, my thoughts get worse. The teacher laughed softly and said, no, you're just finally hearing them. Before, the noise was there, but drowned out by busyness and distraction. Now, with fewer distractions, the volume feels shocking. That doesn't mean meditation is making you sick. It means you're seeing how loud it's been for years. To keep practice safe, he learned to use anchors when things got intense. The feeling of his feet on the floor, the weight of the blanket, the sound of the fan. Instead of going straight into the core of the trauma on a random Tuesday night, he'd stay with these neutral sensations, like holding onto the railing while looking down from a high balcony. You explore, but you don't jump. On some nights, mindfulness meant not meditating formally. If his mind was spinning with dark thoughts, the kindest thing wasn't to sit silently and watch the storm. It was to turn on a soft light, make tea, listen to a gentle talk, or text a trusted person. Zen is not grit your teeth and tough it out. Zen is, what is the wisest, kindest thing I can do with the nervous system I have right now? He also saw how routines act like psychological handrails. A simple pre-sleep ritual, dim lights, no doom scrolling, a few slow breaths, maybe journaling one page, became a powerful signal to his body. We're landing. He'd write 3 small things: what hurt today, what helped today, and one thing I'm grateful I survived. Not to force gratitude, but to remind himself he'd made it this far. Rumination, the endless mental chewing of the same problem, was one of his biggest enemies. Zen gave him a strange tool: curiosity. Instead of arguing with the thoughts, he'd ask, "What does my mind think will happen if it stops worrying about this?" Often the answer was, "If I stop worrying, something bad will catch me." Seeing that logic out loud showed him how exhausted that strategy really was. For panic attacks, the most helpful Zen insight was that they rise and fall like waves. No wave lasts forever, even if in the middle it feels eternal. During one intense attack, he repeated silently, "This is a wave. My job is to surf, not to stop the ocean." He focused on breathing out slowly, as if telling his nervous system, "We're not in a sprint. We're not being chased. We're here." He also learned to treat his mind like a room he lives in, not an enemy he must defeat. If you trash your own room daily with self-insults, comparisons, and catastrophic predictions, of course you won't feel safe inside it. Zen practice became a way of slowly redecorating. Fewer horror posters on the wall, more open windows, less "you're broken," more "you're hurting and learning." Over time, he noticed tiny changes that outsiders might miss. The space between trigger and reaction grew by half a second. Night spirals that used to last hours now lasted 40 minutes. Days of total collapse turned into half days. It wasn't glamorous. There were setbacks, but underneath, something quiet was growing. Trust that he could stay with his experience without being annihilated by it. And then an interesting paradox appeared. The more he accepted that anxiety and sadness might visit again, the less power they had over him. They went from being monsters at the door to being difficult guests he knew how to host. That acceptance opened space for a new question, one that doesn't belong only to mental health, but to the very heart of Zen. If you're not your thoughts, not your symptoms, not even your stories, then who is it that's watching all of this so patiently in the background? Breath after breath, night after night. He sometimes jokes that if a Zen master time-traveled into the 21st century, the first thing they'd say is, "Why is everyone staring into a small glowing rectangle, and why does it make them so anxious?" Our world is noisier, faster, and more connected than any temple in ancient China or Japan. Yet underneath the notifications, the same ancient questions still whisper. Who am I? Why am I restless? How do I live in peace while everything changes so fast? Zen doesn't ask us to run away from the modern world or throw our phones in a river. It asks a sharper question. Who is using who? Are you using technology as a tool, or is it slowly using you? He noticed that many of his most exhausted days didn't come from hard physical work, but from endless micro-stimuli, messages, comments, news, half-finished conversations. His body had been sitting still, but his mind had run 3 marathons. One of the first places he applied Zen in the digital age was the phone-checking reflex, that unconscious hand movement toward the pocket every time there was a pause. Elevator, red light, waiting room. Zen suggested an experiment. Keep the same life, same phone, but add awareness. The next time the hand moved, he'd pause and silently ask, "What am I trying not to feel right now?" Boredom, loneliness, anxiety. Sometimes the answer was uncomfortable. He realized he had been using the screen as a shield against his own inner world. Whenever silence appeared, he'd cover it with noise. Instead of judging himself, he treated that realization like data. The goal wasn't to become a monk without a smartphone. It was to become someone who could sit through 30 seconds of silence without needing a digital anesthetic. He started creating tiny islands of Zen in the middle of his day. Simple rules, not as punishment, but as experiments. No phone for the first 15 minutes after waking. No phone at the table while eating. No doom scrolling in bed. In those spaces, he'd do nothing fancy. Just breathe, look out the window, feel his feet on the floor. At first, it felt like withdrawal. Then a strange thing happened. Ideas, insights, and a softer kind of calm began to visit him again. Science has started to notice what Zen has been exploring for centuries. Attention is a limited resource. Constant switching between apps, tasks, and conversations doesn't just waste time. It burns the brain's fuel in small, invisible ways. Meditation, even in short daily doses, seems to rebuild some of that capacity. He liked to think of it as charging the inner battery instead of always draining it. At the same time, he was fascinated by how neuroscience confirmed parts of the Zen map. Brain scans showed changes in regions linked to emotional regulation, attention, and self-referential thinking after consistent meditation practice. Zen masters might call it loosening the grip of the ego. Neuroscientists might call it altering default mode network activity. Different languages, pointing toward the same mountain. But Zen also pushes back against a purely scientific reduction. It reminds him that consciousness isn't just a brain pattern to be measured. There's something direct, intimate, and mysterious about the fact that he knows his own experience from the inside. No scan can sit in the fear with him at 3 a.m. or in the joy of a simple sunset after a brutal day. Zen protects that mystery from being flattened into a statistic. He also saw Zen spilling into places nobody in ancient Asia could have predicted. Startups, therapy rooms, hospitals, schools, even prisons. He heard stories of inmates learning to watch their thoughts the way they watched the yard, carefully, with attention. Some of them said, "This is the first time I've ever felt free, and I'm still in a cell." Freedom, Zen kept insisting, isn't only a matter of walls. It's a matter of relationship with your own mind. Of course, there's a shadow side to this popularity. Mindfulness gets marketed as a productivity hack, another way to squeeze more output from an exhausted nervous system. Companies offer meditation apps not because they care about souls, but because a slightly calmer employee is a slightly better machine. Zen looks at that with a half smile and asks, "Are you practicing to wake up, or just to function a bit better in your cage?" That question made him rethink his own motivation. Was he meditating to become a more efficient worker in a system that burned people out, or to have the clarity to question that system? Zen doesn't tell you which job to quit or which cause to fight for, but it does ask you to notice. What does your work do to your heart? And what does your heart do to your work? That awareness can quietly push a person toward more honest choices. He also became interested in engaged Zen, people bringing awareness into activism, environmental protection, and social justice. Instead of burning out in waves of righteous rage, they tried to act from a deeper place, compassion that doesn't collapse, clarity that doesn't freeze. He saw that meditation wasn't an escape from the world's pain, but a way to build the emotional muscle to stay with it without shutting down. In conversations with friends who called themselves atheists, he realized Zen could bridge worlds. It didn't demand belief in a creator God or sacred scriptures. They could talk about impermanence, interdependence, and the illusion of a solid self purely in psychological or scientific language, and the insights still worked. At the same time, Zen didn't attack those with faith. It simply said, whatever you believe, can you test it in your direct experience? This flexibility made Zen feel strangely at home in the modern world. It could sit in a lab, in a church, in a therapist's office, or in a bedroom lit only by the blue glow of a phone screen. The outer shapes changed, but the inner invitation stayed the same. Come closer to what is real right now, beyond concepts, beyond slogans, beyond team jerseys of belief and disbelief. On a personal level, he began to see his entire life as a kind of experiment. What happens if I live 1 month more present than before? What happens if I treat each interaction, each email, each walk outside as a chance to be a little more awake? He didn't become a saint. He still snapped, still wasted time online, still fell into old habits. But the direction of his life tilted. Each day became an opportunity to align a bit more with what felt true. And as this ancient practice stretched itself across our hyper-modern world, a quiet realization dawned on him. For all the apps, the books, the talks, and the brain scans, the heart of Zen was still disarmingly simple. A body breathing, a mind noticing, a human sitting with themselves in honesty. From that simplicity, a natural next step emerges almost on its own. How to gather all these threads: mortality, relationships, work, ethics, mental health, modern chaos, and weave them into a single, gentle reminder the viewer can carry into sleep tonight and into the choices they make when the sun rises again. As this journey comes to a close, he wants you to remember one simple thing. Nothing you heard tonight was meant to live only inside this video. Zen is not a pretty idea to think about once and forget. It's a way of walking through your ordinary life differently. Tomorrow morning, when the alarm rings, when you open your phone, when someone irritates you, when fear tries to take the wheel again. The question isn't, did I understand everything? But what tiny thing will I do differently when I wake up? You've just spent time via Hondo through teachings that people have tested for more than 2,500 years. Impermanence, desire, the illusion of a fixed self, the middle way, presence in simple actions, compassion as a natural consequence of seeing clearly. Now the spotlight gently turns back to you. Which part hit the deepest? Was it the hungry ghosts of never-ending wanting? The man hanging from the vine tasting the strawberry between two tigers? The idea that you are not your thoughts? Not even your anxiety? He would gently challenge you with a few questions. How many more nights are you willing to lose wrestling with your mind instead of befriending it? How many more days will you live on autopilot, licking honey from the knife, chasing things that leave invisible scars? What would change if, starting tomorrow, you treated each breath, each sip of coffee, each conversation as if it actually mattered? Because it does. You don't need to become a monk or move to the mountains. Your life as it is now is more than enough to practice. You can turn washing dishes into meditation. You can turn walking to the bus stop into meditation. You can turn a difficult conversation into a chance to listen with your whole heart instead of half your attention. Pick one small experiment for tomorrow. 5 minutes of sitting with your breath, or one meal without the phone, or one honest no where you'd usually fake a yes. If you feel called, you can even write this down before you sleep. Tomorrow, I will practice presence by Save. Tomorrow, when my mind starts to panic, I will remember eat. This isn't homework to impress anyone. It's a quiet promise to yourself that your life is worth more than running in circles inside your head. And now, a little provocation. If you keep living exactly as you lived this last week, same habits, same distractions, same avoidance, where will that path take you in a year? In 10? Is that a future you'd proudly choose? Or one you're silently drifting into? Zen doesn't want you to feel guilty. It wants you to feel awake. You are allowed to change direction. You are allowed to choose a kinder, clearer way of being with yourself and with others. If this journey touched you, let it be the beginning, not the end. Before you close your eyes completely, he invites you to do 3 simple things. Leave a comment sharing one insight that hit you hardest, that helps other people feel less alone. Subscribe to the channel and turn on the notifications, so this kind of deep, honest content keeps reaching you on the days you need it most. And when you're ready, save this video to come back to on restless nights as a reminder that you are more than your storms. For your next step, when you wake up or in another quiet night, you can watch our follow-up video where we go deeper into practical Zen. How to bring Zen into your daily life, from washing dishes to handling anxiety. Think of it as the daytime version of what you live tonight. Same wisdom, but with your eyes open and your feet on the ground. For now, let all the concepts fade into the background. Feel your body supported, your breath moving on its own, your mind a little softer than when we began. You don't need to force sleep. Your only job is to rest in this simple awareness that you are here, alive, and capable of much more peace than you've been taught to expect. When sleep arrives, let it take you. When morning comes, let these seeds of Zen quietly shape the way you step into your day.